本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。
What's good, Internet? Welcome to Waypoint Radio, a very special episode, number 1.22447, and I think it's 2 4s.
Cado?
And then there's an 8, and that's it. That's all I can do. I don't know if the 8 is after the 4s. 1, 2, 2, 4,
7.
7.
Then
Then I think it's 2 4s, and then I think there's an 8, and then I have nothing.
Yeah, all of that's right. All of that's dead
Hey.
on.
I did, I looked at it before,
Yeah,
before the intro, but and then looked away and tried to remember it.
it ends in 7139, and then ellipses. The ellipses is
then
very
ellipses.
important.
this would have been a good actually just opening to the podcast like a Jeopardy style. Everyone write down as many as you can remember and then hold it up.
Yeah.
If we were doing a live stream, that would have been
No, it's NieR
good bit.
1.22 because that is what I wrote in my review 1,000 times.
I still like NieR numbers, but sure. I
NieR
know
numbers
it's
is good.
I know that it's like half of the square root of 2 or something like that, right? Or
It's just the square root of 1.5.
It's just
right?
5.
Right, that's what. Sorry, it's the square root of 1.5. It's not half of the square root of 2. That's a different number. I'm Austin Walker.
Well,
joining me today.
Just as an
Just
aside
come on
to
in,
close on this, when I wrote my feature interviewing 8-4 about localizing Yoko games, which I'm going to try and break the Taro habit and say
just say Yoko.
games. I wrote NieR Replicant because for Western audiences, that's I don't need to put in the numbers as the shorthand. And Square PR very nicely was like, at the top, the first time you introduce it, could you just edit it to add in the 1.22 for the branding purposes? And I was, I get it. I will do it the first time. So I added it the first time and then left it as NieR, because I guess I forgot that it was called NieR Replicant in Japan upon original release. So that is
versus ours, which was Gestalt,
just NieR.
But it was released here as NieR, but in conceptually at least it was the Gestalt version.
Right.
I'm Austin Walker. Joining me today, Patrick Klepek,
Hello.
Ricardo Contreras,
Yo.
and as advertised, special guest, the best to ever do it, Dia Lacina. Thank you. For
Oh,
joining
damn,
us.
you really gassing me up. Hi,
Listen, I know how to show a guest the praise that they deserve.
You need that
it's
energy
been-
Monday morning? Austin's got you.
Yeah, I'm only 3 sips into coffee, so I'm also kind of gassing myself up. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, if I tell myself how important a guest is, then it means I have to do a good job. Otherwise, I'm gonna fuck it up. So
I'm working through the black scrawl that has gone through our
Are you
household.
all right? Are y'all?
I don't know. Let me know.
How separated are your souls from your bodies right now?
Well, it was the black scroll was introduced on a quiet Thursday afternoon by my oldest Jessica with a cough, and then everyone. It's actually the most normal I've felt. It's not like going to get a meal at a restaurant or go to a bar, which I haven't done. But it's not those things. It's actually just the whole house got sick from a cold again. Like a warm blanket that I need to go under because I'm shivering from the chills. Thank you, infant, for bringing that life into the house and keeping us on our toes.
Patrick, how can humans extend their lives?
Oh, that's a great question. Maybe you shouldn't do that. Is that my takeaway from NieR?
What is the destination of souls?
I think what you should do is say that you're going to the moon, but maybe don't actually do it.
But don't do it. Don't worry about it. So
because
much.
you couldn't.
Yeah. God. All right. We should get into talking about this.
That's what all the to the moon talk is, right? On the internet,
That's what people are talking
go
about.
to the moon. Is they're all just big NieR Automata fans that want to talk about it.
Fuck. I just want to say briefly the joke I was going to do before you came up with the try to remember all the numbers bit was I was going to pretend that we were at a Returnal spoiler cast because I got to the 4th biome in that last night finally. That's why I was up so late. I was like, I'm going to do a run. I'm going to do a real run, and I did one, and I got past the 3rd boss, and that was. It's nice to know I could commit to being a gamer and then be a gamer. You know what I mean? I'm gonna
clear out all the areas.
I'm gonna clear out all the areas. I'm gonna hit the cap on the weapon level shit.
Oh,
which is what?
For the first 3 biomes, it's 15.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's good. Even just know when I hit that, I was like, okay, that's good to know.
Get that good DPS.
To know that, I lost to the boss the first time, but I'd done the thing of spending the ether to get a rest point or whatever.
The cyber demon.
The cyber demon rests like sarcophagus, yeah. And then picked up a better weapon that was like higher DPS and just ripped the boss in half. So that's a very interesting boss. People should go like just watch the Biome 3 boss video because it's different than the other ones. Anyway, that bit is done now. I did that bit. I just stapled it on. We should talk about NieR, and I'm just curious now. Dia, you beat it now probably, I guess, a month ago or something because of review timing, right?
Yeah. It feels like it was just like a week ago. Though.
Yeah, I know. And I beat it like 2 weeks ago. And then Patrick, you just beat it Friday. I want to say Cado is sacrificing himself for us. How far in are you, Cado?
I'm in Route B because my cat flooded my fucking bathroom this weekend.
What?
Wait.
So I have a bidet that has a turny knob that turns it on and off, like that's next to the toilet.
So and you got a cat toy next to the toilet.
Yeah, you put a cat toy right up next to that toilet.
Yeah. Sometime in the night, Friday night, she flipped it, and I woke up Saturday morning to
that's a nightmare.
A solid 1.5 inches of water in my bathtub that extended out into my kitchen because they're right next to each other. And so spent the whole day doing that instead of playing NieR, which is what I had planned.
You downstairs neighbors?
I do. It was a thing. They were very nice about it. It was okay. But it was my entire day. And thus, I'm only on Route B.
Well, grinding through the same content of cleaning out your bathroom, not dissimilar to the experience of playing large chunks of NieR.
If you had just gotten 10 titanium alloys, you could have fixed that problem real quick.
Look, you know what? I haven't touched a single weapon upgrade this whole game, and I was fine.
You don't need.
I didn't do a
single one.
You'll be fine.
Just pick up strong weapons.
If you want the stories, but like the level, like you just power level upon like the repetition of the game to the point where
all of this is true.
It's fine.
But also getting a weapon that has 999 damage, where literally bosses die in 2 hits, is extremely funny.
Yeah, Austin and I had like different experiences where you like going through, it's it's a little annoying for some of the bosses, but I guess it only takes a couple of minutes, and like his response was like, a couple of minutes? Don't you mean a couple of seconds?
Yeah.
When one has melded their consciousness to the
junk heap,
then the bosses cease to have meaning.
A couple of minutes? You don't mean like 10 minutes? By using just magic?
God.
I think I got all of the speedrun boss fight achievements, which were all
nice.
It's really funny because you look at those achievements. It's like beat Cleo in like a minute, and it's just like initially you're like, what the fuck, and then it's just like,
first of all, you're like, who the fuck is Cleo? Because I don't have names for any of these bosses, and then you're like, that's impossible. Including, I think that we should say real quick, we're gonna spoil the shit out of this game. We're probably gonna spoil the hell out of Automata also.
Yep.
D, are you a Drakengard person?
It's been too long. Like I've got like the vestiges of it, but I don't.
There's a chance some Drakengard, some third, some third hand,
some Drakengard 3
stuff.
E ending, which is like the extent of Austin and I's like Drakengard knowledge.
I couldn't even drop that right now for you, Patrick. I know Drakengard 1's E ending. I don't know Drakengard 3's. I don't know enough to know.
Oh, right, because I guess it meant 2, right? Because 2 is the one that, or is 1 or 2 is E ending that leads
1
into
and 3 are the Yoko games.
Okay.
2 is a third party. 1 is the one that ends with the dragon in Tokyo, which leads to the white chlorinate. Nope. Is it chlorination? Is that
chlorination? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Getting it all right. 1, 2, 2.
Am I? Is there
right.
is there an ending with a giant baby, or am I imagining that?
You are not imagining it. You are. You have committed like a memory that is a visual memory that is not dissimilar from the actual thing, but like, I see how you got there.
There are, I think, okay, so there's oh my God, what am I looking at? There are,
did you find the endings for Drakengard? Is that what you're looking at?
I think there might be a different ending fight from Drakengard that involves giant floating babies, but that's not the Tokyo fight.
Okay, that's a different ending.
It's a different ending.
And then the Queen Beast also
shit.
Wow.
Right. Yes, that is another one. Anyway, we're going to talk a lot about NieR all the way through. So prep for spoilers in regard to that. The thing I was going to say was the Devil and Popula fight, I remember getting there on my C ending or my B ending and being like, if I don't get it this time, there's no way I'm getting it when I go back for C and D for the speed run, which is like 2 minutes or something like that, 2 or 3 or 4, somewhere in there. And I didn't get it. And I was like, well, fuck, I'm just never going to get this. And then whatever happened between those 2 runs, I got a weapon up high enough where I was like, oh, that was nothing. So those weapon upgrades are not to be played with. I very much feel like find a weapon you think is cool looking and maybe upgrade that one, and then read the weapon stories online because they're all on there.
Yeah, once I got the Phoenix Spear, I was like, I'm good. I love the Phoenix Spear a lot.
Because that's the weapon.
Yeah. There's a thing of just like, I want my weapons to look dope, which is frustrating because the best weapons in the game don't look dope. And getting them up to like those high levels and like needing to ignore the 999 damage, and be like, I'm going to use the 800 damage instead. It's fucking fine. I swear. It's still like up, gamer brain says, no, don't do that. You have to use the best one.
But the efficiency.
Yeah. But the other thing there, I think that's I guess maybe worth digging into is just like the different ways we all came at this game. So I definitely played it completely completionist, or damn near, between doing all the side quests, getting the lunar tier, which we'll get to at a point, and doing, I did not get every achievement. I'm not going to get every achievement at this point, but I did kind of do everything that I could reasonably do, like kind of a standard completionist playthrough. I'm curious how y'all have like come to this stuff and how much of it you left on the table.
I generally only do side quests in game if I can do them on the way or like as I'm doing the main quests. And so I kind of stuck to that here, except for the ones I looked up which ones I needed because I knew about the whole like you need all the weapons. Like that's the one thing that I looked up.
Right. To get ending C and D, you need to get all of the weapons in the game. There's no diegetic reason for this. You just need to do it.
That's just a thing. That's just the
something might happen.
Yep. And so I completed those as much on the way as I could, but then did have to backtrack a couple times for one in particular. But otherwise, which gave me a very interesting moment where with the married couple and their set of quests.
Red bag couple?
Red bag couple, yeah.
Who are new for this edition of the game, I believe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It is interesting because they seem so central now that the Little Mermaid ship quest thing is like in the middle of this game. I went back to watch a Let's Play of the original at some point and like seeing the way that game flows if you don't have that go back to seafront one more time to deal with that big boat and the little girl and all that. Mm-hmm. It's like the speed from whatever the thing before that is the thing before that
it depends,
wedding that breaks down? What is it? I guess so.
So the order I did it in was junkyard, wedding, seafront, back to junkyard, then forest.
Oh yeah. Okay. I always do forests. I did junkyard, forest, seafront, wedding, seafront, I think. Anyway, the point is that like without it, you get to Shadowlord's castle much more quickly because that new thing, the mermaids, the Little Mermaid quest is kind of really slow because you have to like pace around that boat for so long. But yeah, it sounds like you did a fair share. Dia, how about you?
I did everything except look up Kaine's skirt and the gardening, because when I was playing for it for review, I wanted to do everything because I was like, I might only hit this once. Right. So, and I know generally how long this game is and how fast I can get through it. So like, we're pretty cool. And I didn't do the gardening because like for some reason my gardening was just screwed up and like never worked.
Oh, weird.
Like some of the plots I wouldn't be able to click on them at all.
Oh. Huh.
So it was just like, okay, I guess this is just some weird glitch in my game and we're just not doing the lunar tier. That's fine.
Just deal with it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, if you're not able to use all of those plots, then it's
not going to happen.
Yeah, totally. It's just the rates are so low that you can't trust that you'll actually get one in any reasonable amount of time. And then Patrick, I know you had to kind of rush through stuff, and you gave me the side quest.
I didn't. I played through routes A and B in the same way that I would have really played them. Yeah. Casually on my own, and those are the most like substantive route changes are A and B. Like B
There's a
gives
point at
you
which I was like, you could maybe watch C, D, and E and be okay to do this.
So I could have, and
right?
I really did consider it. But I like consider myself like now like a big fan of Yoko's work, and I think it was worthwhile despite like my exaggerated like response to the like the grind of the content to experience like this rough draft of a form that, you know, it still has its like rough edges in Automata, but like it's clearly like wouldn't be surprised if like this became one of his signature sort of things going forward. And it's interesting to see like how this version of the game plays this. So I wanted to kind of sit with that, and I didn't find a lot of it enjoyable, you know, to go through a lot of those sequences over and over again. But I did find the experience memorable because there is a specificity for why he's doing it. I just disagree that like it, you know, reinforces a theme to the degree that is necessary for the player. And then like strongly disagree with like have like the lengths that you have to go to in the Route E1, especially if you're doing them back to back to back. Like if this was a game you were revisiting, coming back to, you know, like it was like, oh, if you come back in 3 months, you can get this route. You know what I mean? Like there are ways to like.
I feel like Route E is the one that has most. I feel the strongest about. I'm glad I did that stuff because it's so distinct from B to C. See, so for people who have not played this, Route A is the game. You start as playing. I guess I should summarize this game as best as possible for people who've never played it at all and who are just like still listening because they want to hear us talk about it. In NieR, you are playing NieR Replicant version numbers. You are playing a boy who has a little sister who is sick with a disease called the Black Scrawl. It makes her fatigued and tired and ill. And you are doing your best to try to find a cure for her while also making enough money to like, you know, you're just doing chores for people around town, basically. That leads you into a situation where you begin adventuring. You meet a ragtag group of characters, including Kaine, who is a kind of social outcast, who you learn is kind of half shade, which you read as like half demon. If you don't know anything about the lore of this world, who was mocked as a child for other reasons. You meet Emil, who is a boy who cannot, when you first meet him at least, look at anyone without petrifying them, and so he's afraid of his own gaze. And then eventually is revealed to be / combines with another character / just changes into the character whose head you've seen Yoko Taro wear, the kind of big spherical face with a big smile kind of chiseled onto it, who's kind of a floaty around super mage type.
Yeah, or if you played Automata, then it's, you know, it's the shop that you
it's the shopkeeper
with.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And then also Grimoire Weiss, who is a very highfalutin magical book that allows you to cast spells and who is very prim and proper for most of the game, etc. And the four of you end up going on an adventure. You go from town to town. You solve local problems by helping the king or the postmaster or the lady in the lighthouse or whatever. You help people out of this is I should add a note here. There's no one wrote in about this. The text adventure section of this game. What is right? Text adventure shit here, and then we'll get around to it. And eventually you end up being confronted by someone called the Shadow Lord, who steals your sister away, who seems to be a dark version maybe of yourself, who has his own book, Grimoire Noir. And then there's a big time jump. After the time jump, there's a 5-year time jump. And during that, by the way, you've lost Kaine. Kaine like sacrifices herself to try to stop a monster. And does Emil get fucked up during that part too?
No,
and then you go back
afterwards.
Yeah.
That's
okay,
like the first
the
thing that
jump.
happens after the time jump, basically.
That's like one of the things that doesn't repeat, right? Because the way game,
right.
like Route B and C both come back after you've gone back and recruited Emil, where he turns into the new body form.
Yeah.
Miss New Booty Emil. Yeah.
B picks up when you're on depetrifying Kaine.
Depetrifying Kaine, right? Yeah. And then you kind of do this time jump and you go from little boy NieR, like, you know, young teen NieR to like young adult NieR, old teen NieR, whatever, where he's like on his Raiden from Metal Gear Solid shit. He like does a bunch of wild ass double-handed sword shit immediately, and is just like angry about shades, which are the kind of quote unquote monsters of the world. And you go on to again look for a bunch of tchotchkes that are going to let you into, MacGuffins that are going to let you into the Shadow Lord's castle to go rescue your sister. And in the back half of the game, in the kind of second half of any of the routes, you go from place to place again, and guess what? Things go bad in both of them, in those places. People die, weddings are ruined by death. You interfere in the natural ecological situation in places, etc. And you get more context for that in Route B, where you can understand what the enemies are saying. All of them are like maudlin. Like there's like a real over the top tragic vibe for each of them. And eventually you go confront the Shadow Lord, you beat the Shadow Lord, you get back your sister, and some more tragedy happens depending on which route you're on, to some degree or other. And then you play it again, right? And that is like the very basic gist of it, through routes A and B. And then in C, there's a big final thing. C and D is a big final thing in which Kaine is kind of losing control of herself because of being part shade and having lived for as long as she has with the shade in her, and having been so violent, I want to say, and just like slowly losing herself to it. And you have to make a decision about whether or not to let her kind of live in exchange for your life, or to kill her like she requests so that she can have peace. And then now ending E attaches onto that, in which it builds off of the one in which you sacrifice yourself, and you get to play as her trying to recover you and her memories of you and the world as it was in some ways, before you were driven to rage, by playing as her for a segment. So that's like the game. So that's my 5-minute summary of what is NieR. You'll note I didn't talk about the Black Scrawl. I didn't talk about what a Gestalt or a Replicant was. I'm sure we'll talk about that stuff as we go forward, but I really think that this is a game about the relationships between these characters, and the genre relationships between this game and like horror games and RPGs and adventure games more than anything else. So I wanted to emphasize those elements. Also, I didn't mention the thing that Patrick just mentioned a lot, which is there's a ton of fucking repetition in this game. Most notably and obviously and unavoidably is the repetition between routes A, B, and then C/D. You're just playing the back half of that game again in B and C and D, the adult NieR part. In Route E, you replay like the first. How long did it take you to get through Route E? Or to get to the Kaine part?
You have to play probably 3 to 4 hours of that like original.
If you're like, especially if you're watching everything, right?
Yeah. Which I was not, but I guess if you
but
yeah, you have to play a fair amount at the beginning before it like splinters off to the point where like where it splinters off in the area. It's the second time you go.
Second fight.
I read, I was like, oh, it's going to split off in the area. And I was like, did I fuck something up? Because there is like a thing you have to do, like, you have to enter a different name when you start a new game. I was like, I did that. I was like, did I screw up? Did I like mix up the names in my head? Did I completely botch this whole thing? And I didn't. It's just that I had like this like horrible moment where I realized like I looked at like, a walkthrough to remind myself. I was like, no, it's the second time you go to the area that like that's when it's going to kick in.
The boss and all that.
But going through that section was less I want to be less of a grind than like Route C is the real low point of
Route
the game.
C is
you're getting the least amount of extra stuff. Like Route B, you're getting the alternative perspectives of the quote unquote enemies in the game is great. Like that's like when I think of NieR and I pull like one of its like many narrative tricks that it pulls out, like that's the one that I like enjoy the most, and it's used to great effect here.
The monsters are actually people and they all have feelings. And you should feel bad for killing them. And like in Automata, in which it's revealed that 9S is the one who can hear what everyone is actually saying and see their names and recognize that they're like fucking people. and then decides not to anyway multiple times. Here you learn that Kaine can do that, and they kind of tease it in even as far back as Route A, in which she's sometimes responding to stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
That you can't understand, but she's like responding as if she's in a conversation, because she is, it turns out. To that point about the repetition and monotony, I think that the Route E going back to the child NieR stuff is the most interesting, because you've spent so much time away from that period of the game. And so there's so many little things that hit a little bit different. Things just like, oh, right, remember when this field was mostly sheep and there were a couple of shades here and there? Yeah. Because eventually that becomes just, overloaded with dozens and dozens of enemies. And then just in general, the difference in the atmosphere in town, redoing all of that starting stuff and having the context of like where it's all going, I think is really good. But whereas I do think Route C is the one in which like I'm buttoning through all of the cutscenes at this point. I'm not really engaged, except for the new Little Mermaid stuff, which they put in Route C, so there is something new in Route C, I guess. And yeah, I in terms of like that monotony, I think the Route C stuff doesn't work for me. Where it does work, and what we've talked about on the podcast before, is the like I'm willing to go here on the side quests. I'm willing to like brain off junk heap. What is the mental mode this game is putting me in when it's asking me to rerun this same dungeon 10 times to the point now where I could probably draw this dungeon in my mind. What is that affect that it's slipping me into? And how is that distinct from the rest of what the game does? And what's it add to it? And for me, I really like thinking through that stuff. And I also just like playing the game to the degree that like after I was done, I kept wanting, I wish I'd saved some side quests to do for a post game, but I didn't know there would be a post game in the way that there is after Route E. So I couldn't have done that. And in some ways that's the beauty of Route E. But I'm curious, Dia, how did the repetition stuff hit for you, given how much of it there is?
So it's really funny because for me, even like, with the original NieR, because this is, all this repetition is still present in Gestalt.
Right. And in some ways, for true NieR fans, this is just rerunning NieR again with another, filter over it, being this is brother NieR instead of dad NieR, right?
Yeah, like it was just kind of, a lot of it was just like, okay, we are once again reinterpreting the same text through a different lens. That's not even really a different lens.
Totally.
But like, so for me, the repetition always worked. And I never, when it was boring, I'm like, yeah, because this is supposed to be boring. And like, I think a lot of that is because if you spend a lot of time in psychotherapy, you understand that repetition is everything. And like, this is one of the influences for this is Evangelion. And so, and like, just kind of the history of anime at the time. We do a lot of, the psychoanalytics and, so there's this very obvious, like, okay, you were pulling a lot from like poorly understood / just like Wikipedia level, history of psychology and like psychological thought. You were trying to do something with the repetition, even if it doesn't actually work, it still kind of works on just a very basic level for me. So I'm just like, okay, yes, we are continuously revisiting this series of traumas, and like, as we progress through the game, we are constantly revisiting these traumas, and not only these traumas, but like the inciting events for the trauma and gaining new clarity as we revisit them, until finally we kind of get to this plateau where it's like, okay, what are we doing here? We are just kind of, just grinding through this trauma and doing cleanup. And then finally at the very end, we do it like one last time with a completely different, kind of context.
And outcome, right?
Because outcome. Exactly.
One of the most fascinating things about this game is you play through Route, for me, I play through Route A, I'm like, okay, bad shit's happening. I play through Route B, my expectation is with a new perspective, maybe things will go differently, because I will know that, for instance, Fira should just not stand there for a second and she won't get eaten by the wolves. Just don't be there for just 1 second. You'll be okay. Go inside. You have doors. But that's not this game. This game is doing the thing of, oh, look, the reason the wolves are mad is because they've been overhunted. for the last generation or whatever, because the relationship between wilderness and humanity has fallen apart in the past couple of generations or whatever. So trauma can't be avoided all the time. Knowledge isn't enough to protect you from trauma. So I'm like, okay, well, Route C is definitely going to be different because it's the third route. And now, because I know what Kaine knows, maybe now I'll know how to No, absolutely not. That wedding is going to go bad every time. That little girl is never going to, there is a slight change in the Route C ending for her, but it ain't good. Like, it isn't. It's more about, again, it's actually going back to what Dia said about a relationship to trauma. The change that happens from Route B to Route C with the Little Mermaid quest is about how the characters relate to the trauma they experienced and this person in their lives who meant something to the postman, but also was maybe not it was a very complicated relationship, let's say. And then also how Kaine responds to that situation as a reflection of how she feels about herself and her own situation. And so, like, I think that's one of the most fascinating things is I came into this game expecting concurrent playthroughs to be about changing things, fixing things. The way that, like, playing something like why am I blanking on the Moon Zelda? Oh,
Majora's
Mask. Majora's Mask is about learning what the cycle is and intervening in the cycle. You're slowly
building the timeline. Like you're putting it together over
and that's just not this game until Route E, and even that isn't about going back and fixing things. It's about remembering how things broke and then trying to, like, build out a new world from there with the people you want in it, you know?
So, having not actually played through the extra ones, but I still had this understanding going into the end of A that there would be repetition. I have, like, a note here about Devla and Popola's, like, role in that as the kind of metatextual, like, marker for kind of the rules that you have to abide by, like a pseudo BioShocky thing, but really it's talking about the, like, human need to death drive, basically the need to, like, continue, even if it's monotonous, even if it's repetitive, even if it feels like you're not going anywhere. Like, the idea of, like, you're gonna go down this path because you want to keep living, or something like that. Like, that's
what like Kaine's grandmother is, like, a big part of her pitch to Kaine is, like, no, you need to live because you live until your dying breath, and then when that's gone, then great, then you can experience death, but until then you need to stand up and keep walking.
Totally.
Which is a great case for Route C's ending, by the way, of her being like, I'm ready. It's okay. You could fucking kill me. I've lived a good life. I'm content with this. I think that was a surprising thing, was that, like, there was the foundational work done to make that not feel like the bad ending if you didn't.
It's acceptance as opposed to how the character is, like, presented. When you first meet Kaine as someone who, like, just has a death wish, and it's like, oh, thank God, like, someone just shove a dagger in me so I can end this, as opposed to that where she has accepted her fate because she's walked as far as she can.
Totally. Anyway, Cado, you had more to say there.
That was basically the question of, like, seeing their kind of metatextual role as both the rules of the game and also this drive to continue, and whether or not that played into the other, because I hadn't seen the other endings yet. I was curious.
They remain basically the same throughout BC,
right? Which I kind of assumed that, but, like, was there any more insight into, like, how that plays out? Which you just mentioned about Kanye's different ending, right?
That's all Kaine stuff. There's not really stuff with Devil and Popola in terms of their position or relationship outside of the text documents that they give you, that you have to read in a very short window of time because they get deleted the second you start your next route playthrough. Dia, am I forgetting anything, Patrick? There's no more with them, really, right?
Like, I mean, really, like, if you want,
less
the
more
broader understanding.
Yeah, I meant less more with their characters specifically. I was thinking of their characters as the
go play NieR Automata, and then you understand them.
Yo, that's like when when I started up this game, I was like, oh wait, what the fuck? Because I remember them from, and but like I absolutely need to go back and play that game now.
I'm gonna voice a beef, not a real beef. This is a fake
damn
beef. Beef hours. Let's go. There's there's a Chris Plant article over on Polygon.com.
Oh damn! Here we go.
Should you play NieR Replicant or NieR Automata first? Yes, that's the headline. And Plant goes over different. Like, oh, I just want to see what the fuss is about. Which game should I play first? I hate spoilers, and I'm patient when it comes to older design, and I have some time on my hands. That means you should play NieR Replicant, etc. One of the things that Chris says in this is, I can't call him Chris. He's Plant in my mind. I have to call him Plant. I'm just going to read this. I just want to see what the fuss is about, and I only have so much time. Then Plant says, you should start with NieR Automata. It's technically the sequel to NieR Replicant, but it builds upon the original game in every way. I think I agree with that. The combat is faster and more pleasurable. The story is easier to follow. That's the part where I'm like, what are you talking about? The story is easier to follow. Never in my life. I love Automata. I think Automata, I like Automata more than Replicant for reasons I'm sure we'll get into.
Also, honestly, I kind of like that you can turn like 70% of this game into a three-dimensional shmup. More so than NieR, I feel like. Automata.
It's a different game. Or it is a much different game in feeling. But the idea that the story is easier to follow in Automata if what you care about is... I don't... Things like Devil and Popula showing up in that game were so strange for me at the time because I knew third hand that they were important characters from NieR, but I didn't know who they were or what their story was doing. Yeah. Likewise for Emil, there's a version of Emil's story that you learn in Automata, but like, you know, you go to Kaine's hut in Automata and it's surrounded by lunar tears, and like, what are you supposed to make of that? You know, I love Automata. I actually. Yeah, you don't remember that?
No.
Yeah,
it's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. It's the end of the Emil side quest. It's a lot of stuff, if I remember right. About you have to find a lunar tear for him, and then he eventually gives you like a key to his special place, and it's Kaine's like little house with the painting of the grandma. Like it's the whole situation, and it's surrounded by blooming lunar tears. It's great.
Fuck.
And so yeah, there's like I don't know how stuff like Devil and Popula there where they are still sort of in penance for what they do here, what they take part of here is like hard to understand, I think, in a way that it's not that it's weird because that's the version of this I did do, right? I did play Automata first. I didn't know what their deal was. I didn't know what Emil's deal was. I didn't really know what the Black Scroll was or whatever, but I still think this game's story is and I really liked that game despite that stuff. That said, I think this game's story is so much more straightforward and so much more easy to wrap your head around, even if / because it doesn't obsess over what the androids Devila and Popula are and what their relation is to the Gestalt project and et cetera, et cetera. And we'll get a question about all that stuff eventually too. Before I move on, I do want to ask Dia, as the person that we were talking about replaying this game 10 years later or whatever, how does the switch from dad NieR to bro NieR feel?
So a big thing about like kind of especially like with like Route A or like so yeah like with the first part of the game. I should say not Route A, but yeah, you only play the first part in Route A.
Like young NieR.
When you were young NieR, young NieR.
Young NieR, yes.
Young NieR, my new, Yoko's spin-off, young adult series. You know what? Give it to me, honestly.
NieR,
like, give me a 6-part Young NieR.
My favorite Scott Pilgrim background character, Young NieR.
Would he be? He'd be into NieR, wouldn't he? He'd be such a fucker about it.
Oh, he'd be huge, annoying. I don't understand any of it, but I think it's really cool. Anyway,
you gotta play it again.
Yeah,
like
this is weird as fuck.
Sorry, Dia, continue.
Please, Dia, make a good point. So that we
please save us from my side.
So a big thing about the first part of the game is it is an ultimately it's a narrative about being a caretaker, and like that really hit a lot more for me now because I mean there's a couple of things like one like now I know what it's like to play this game as you know, a sibling rather than a parent, because not a parent. So like I could, you know, I understood, you know, the themes of the game and I could experience it, but like it did not hit the same way as like, oh, you know, my sister was chronically ill as a child. And like, you know, I was, you know, the big brother. So I had to take care of my sister all the time with my mom, and like she had to work. So like I definitely understood that that was kind of like touched into that, but also like having to be a long-term caretaker for my grandmother when she had Alzheimer's. Like I completely understood what, you know, like the NieR character kind of really is like grappling with, and the selfishness in the selflessness.
Yes.
Which was so like, you know, I don't really think NieR is that special. I don't think that Yoko Taro is all that special as a writer, but that shit fucking hits when it hits.
Here you're talking about, I'm guessing, or I'm extrapolating, the ways in which the mission that NieR has given himself is often used as a sort of badge for his own, like the ways, the moment that there's a point at which altruism ends and it switches into being something self-righteous in points. And I think this is especially true in the back half of the game when she's missing, because at that point there is all of the emotion without the object that's associated. Not that
there's nothing to live for.
Right?
Like he suddenly has to invent his own motivation.
He's inventing it right at that point, and not reckoning with the idea that perhaps she's just gone. But in the first half, I think that there's this slippage sometimes between I'm a noble caretaker and I'm a noble caretaker. You know. Is that, and that feels true to life to you?
Yeah, like, no, like I was just playing through it and it's just like, wow, fuck, this hits. Like, especially like when it's just like the concept of like, I know what's best for you. And then like you get the diary entry, you get Yona's diary entries throughout, and she's just like, I just want to try and have a normal day. I just want to go, you know, to the library, you know.
And like, those are the ways in which he refuses to be a good caretaker. He is interested in, I'm going to go kill a bunch of things so I can cure you, instead of, I'm going to walk with you to the library.
Yeah.
I'm going to
just appreciate the time that we have, as opposed to like obsessing over the time that could be.
You would just cut the difference a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like, think about what
she's sleeping all day. You got plenty of time to go fight monsters. Just hold her hand.
Just hold her hand for a little while.
Read
the
her shitty food she makes.
Eat the fucking bad food.
The town is around the corner. You're doing all sorts of help for them. They'll give you some soup while she's sleeping. Like, just eat it, you fucker.
Well, it's so funny because that also speaks to the frustration of being a caretaker, because it is frustrating. Like,
sure.
And so like when it's like, you know, Yona like wants to make NieR a meal and he can't not be like a dick about it.
Yeah. Totally.
Like
he can't hold it in.
And it's just like, okay, yeah, because you've been doing this a long time and you no longer you failed at properly processing all of these feelings you are having and all of the, you know, the shit you have both, you know, had put on you, but also that you have taken on yourself.
A lot of this is. Well, go ahead, finish.
Oh, you've taken this on yourself, and no one has asked you to. Right.
This is a self-appointed thing. So this is part of why I really end up coming around and thinking I like Automata more, is because, or not. One of the things I like about Automata, I guess I'll say, is that it feels like it has decided not to let this critique that we're saying be in the background, and instead foreground this critique. And wrap it up in 9S, who has a victim complex, who has positioned himself as a hero and avenger, who uses that to justify and cover up unhealthy relationships and desire, not unhealthy desires, but desires that he does not have a healthy relationship with. And I think that stuff really feels like an extension of NieR's own relationships in this game. And also, the thing I want to go back and say is to talk about the thing of like, you never spend time with Yona outside of the little side scrolly in your house, talk to her bit. Is like, this is a game that has a system for where characters can follow you. You get Kaine and Emil and Grimoire Weiss in this version, like flying around with you all the time. never give you a side quest where you go walk around town with her. You never get a side quest where you go fishing with her, with Yona. You never get any, that technology is explicitly not deployed to that end. There are no side quests where you go pick flowers with her. She is a quest marker that you go back to and deal with the same way you do the grocer who needs something, or the dude who wants to build a really good knife out of titanium alloy, which, by the way, is the same amount of alloy you need to upgrade like the best weapons in the game. So what the fuck are you doing? Why do you need a knife that good? God damn it. And so that's not, and then the other half of this that I cannot fucking shake is, and we're going to really spoil ending E here, but at the end of ending E, you get your save file restored from the end of the game, your final ending D save before you go into the Shadow Lord's castle. Whatever the most recent save is there, it gets restored. And it's so fascinating to me that Yona is not visible in the ending E final sequence. She is not part of your party. It is not like Kaine. It's Kaine, Emil, and Grimoire Weiss meet back up and are together again, and then they pull NieR out of memory itself, out of the machine flower tower.
They do a Kingdom Hearts.
They 100% do a Kingdom Hearts, Cado. There's a bit where when NieR slips from Kaine's memories, it's like she's reaching down and his body turns into like digital pixels. It's dead ass a Kingdom Hearts, Birth by Sleep,
100%.
or what's the memories one? Whatever the digital memories hacking one is. Dream Drop Distance? No, that's not that one.
Recoded, I think.
Recoded it. I was like, this is recoded for sure. This is, Digisora or whatever is happening on screen right now. But Yona is not there. Yona is not part of the final sequence there. And the moment that it restores you to the big triumphant return, which was a triumphant return for me for gardening reasons, is without Yona. It doesn't bring you back to a point where Yona is there. It brings you to a point when Yona is missing, which is like, there is, again, not to get into the psychoanalysis of this all, but what's more important is your relationship with these new people than the presence of Yona, the object that you have built the character has built his life towards. And I think that's, again, they could have done a different thing there. They could have made different decisions there, and they didn't. And that says something.
That's actually a question I have because I haven't seen those other endings. Does her situation ever change at all? Because so far you've mentioned that there's something slightly different with Kaine in one of the endings.
No, I don't think. But there's never one where she's be able to co-inhabit the body with the other self or something like that, else, right?
Yeah.
Or splits off and becomes an android.
That always happens the same way each time, no matter
what. The difference is in ending E, in Route E, you get updates that she is back living in town and doesn't remember. No one remembers NieR in that ending, in that route. This is why I'm saying it's also Kingdom Hearts. When he slips from Kaine's memory.
I literally
at the end, the world's memory.
At the end of my A route, I was typing wow, Yona's looking real nominee right about now.
Oh yeah. Damn, bitch, you looking real nominee right now.
The highest compliment that can be given.
That's it, exactly. Oh, God. So yeah, I don't. It's weird to me that Yona is not weird to me. It's telling to me, and I think it's something that I wish the game grappled with more actively. Or maybe I don't wish it because I'm happy to have this conversation.
Well, because it's also a game in which you don't solve anything. There's no the world is still destined to ruin. The Black Squall. The shades are going to kill everyone. That is the story of this world. It's just that the ending of this game, NieR E, the sort of canonical end is, well, accept the family you have and make the time, that you've got the best of it. And that's all that you can really do till you can't put another step forward. And it's not about you don't end anything. Everyone's still fucking screwed, including the fate of your family, insofar as, whenever the shades will, descend upon you.
In fact, my understanding is ending E helps to doom the world in many ways because it destroys one of the potential recovery mechanisms in exchange for getting NieR back, right?
Yeah, that seems bad. That doesn't seem like a good, like, sorry, NieR. I don't know that you coming to terms with your own fucking, like, complex was worth dooming all the people of the town. As shitty as their side quests were, I don't need to fix the fountain. I don't. Like, you know what? Find someone else.
It's very good.
Well, like, it's one of those things. It's like, this kind of goes back to the repetition of the game. Is that ultimately, there is a reading of this where NieR is all in the past. Like, this is we talk about text in the active sense, but like ultimately, like, this is a received bit of history that we are playing through, and we're gonna get psychoanalytic here for that, because like this plays into repetition compulsion, which is a phenomenon in which a person repeats events over and over and over again, attempting to master the trauma. And in a sense, we could argue that like maybe Yona's gone.
Right. And
this is all just NieR just working through his shit about, I was a caretaker and that was my identity. And then I fucked up, or not, NieR feels he fucked up. Yona died anyway. And now he has to, understand and come to grips with an identity that is not that of a caretaker anymore. The one that is a brother who has lost his sister.
And this is part of why I think it's so fascinating that the state of the world at the final moment of this game, post-ending E, is an extension of the period of loss in which you get to just be in the world with your current crew of friends, because one reading of that is about having worked through that trauma, accepted Yona's loss. You'll never go try to save her again, right? Because there's nothing, you recognize there's no way that goes different. And instead you get to be like me and work on your does the game like end there? Like, I feel like the game is far more interested in resolving Kaine's relationship with her trauma than it is actually in NieR's. Like, NieR's is ended. You can interpret it. You can take that ending to mean, that is what would happen after the scene continues. But I feel like you can't actually. I don't think like it doesn't put a bow on it in the way that would like Kanye, like she. You keep saying Kanye.
I know.
It's just Kaine.
But the game is like far more interested in actually putting a bow on her relationship with her trauma. Trauma, yeah, definitely. And I think that stuff works so well. I mean, I think, again, I've said this before. I said, like, I can't imagine having waited 10 years for this. And even if you'd read The Lost World, which I think is the name of the story that Route E is, like, from, which is a very short story that you can just find on the internet. The ways in which that game won, or that ending, that route shows Kaine living a day-to-day life, seemingly in acceptance of who she is without needing to, without at the same time having been like sublimated into living in the village and just like living a quote unquote normative life, right? She still lives out in in her place. She still is the person she is. She has not like been consumed by someone else's identity in some ways. And then you're right, but insisting on a thing she wants is such a powerful moment for her. And that whole ending sequence where, Emil comes back, Grimoire Weiss comes back. That stuff, I popped so fucking hard when they showed up. And I genuinely think that stuff it is extremely like big anime hours, but I was all the way here for it, because this is a game that I think builds the foundation for wanting to root for Kaine in an unabashed way, even though you know that she is the character who most understands that the things that everyone is doing is kind of fucked up because these are people they're fighting. It's seeing her work through not only her relationship to her own self-hatred, but also specifically learning to accept the emotional bonds she's been forming that just is incredibly moving to me. Should we take a break and do questions?
Let me do my garden update.
Okay.
And then I will move to questions. Right. It's garden update first. Most important thing here. So last time I checked in, I had told you I couldn't even talk about it without spoiling what happened.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
With my garden.
Yeah. No, okay, now I'm on board again. Let's go.
So I had that quest, the get 10 pink seeds. To get the seeds, you have to crossbreed flowers.
Yep.
I had one pink flower, I want to say, blooming. And I was like, I'm just going to go run Route C. I just want to see it. I just want to see one route, and then I'll come back to the garden. I go through Route C. I'm like, damn, kind of just want to see Route D. I kind of, you know what? I'm gonna save this in a different slot. That way you can delete the other save.
No.
I may run through Route D. So I run through Route D, and at the end of Route D, the thing that happens is Kaine is dying, and then very paternalistically, NieR is like, no, it's not allowed. I am the noble caretaker. I will give my life for others, and that's how I will be remembered. And the game's like, fuck you, actually, no one's going to remember you. And you give your life for Kaine, and the thing that it says over and over again is, we're going to delete your saves. Are you good with this? And at that point, I couldn't say no because I'd already committed. I'd already been there. And I was like, I guess I'm never going to fucking get that trophy. I'm never going to get all the flowers. I'm never going to finish the side quest. I'm never going to, you know what? Go ahead and delete my saves. And I fucking felt that because it meant my garden was not complete. I mean, I didn't get that final quest. It meant I didn't ever get a lunar tier. More than deleting the words in the book. Do you know what I mean? I don't care about that word system. That word system never really works in this game. Deleting my weapons, whatever. You know, like, I'm done. It's fine. So all that stuff got deleted. Then, after finishing ending E, where it brings that save back, you have no idea. You know what? It was cool when Emil came back. But when my garden came back, and my pink flowers were there, so I could go pick them up and turn them in, and then immediately keep planting. Because, like, basically, after I got ending E, for the next week, I continued playing to get the lunar tier. I continued checking in every few hours to go in and plant more flowers and manage my garden. This is partly, Patrick, why I'm so focused on the NieR
Route F.
Route L farming.
Route L lunar farm.
Tier, yeah.
Route L lunar tier.
That is and again, I think this is probably partly why my read on the Route E stuff shifts towards being about NieR and not as much about Kaine, is because I did then immediately play a new route where all I did was fish and farm, and got to just like be in that world, running around with these characters, wishing I'd saved some other side quests so I could hear more dialogue in some ways, right? So that was my farming update. That's why I couldn't explain.
Now it makes sense. It's like, how possibly could it be?
Because I can't even just say the part about the save deletes. I have to talk about the big thing, which is it restores a save at the end. It inverts the subversion of deleting your save at the end.
Which never happens in Automata, right? It's just gone. Poof.
Yeah, no, it's
just gone. It's 100% gone. Yeah, and in fact, it's gone to better effect, I think, because in Automata it goes away in exchange for the promise that
it's a gift.
Right, it's a gift. It's a gift to it's a seed in some ways to extend the farming metaphor.
Here
to
is
the possibility
my lunar tier that I will shed as my 40 hours of the time is
of time. It's gone. Get rid of it. So that's my garden update. We should take a break and come back and answer some Q&A questions. We'll be right back. All right, we are back, and we're going to turn to some questions. People sent them in. If you have questions for future non-NieR casts, you can send them to gaming@vice.com.
No, our never-ending, we'll have a Route B, a follow-up NieR cast with just more NieR questions.
It's the same, except it also comes with a text file of various thoughts we had while other people were talking to provide extra context. Ruby writes in and says, hey, all. This one's for the inevitable NieR Replicant Spoilercast, so unmarked spoilers, etc. I started thinking after Austin's comment today, April 27th pod, about how NieR is a game about monstrousness and how that's constructed. The main party are all considered monsters in their own ways, and the shades, or should I say gestalts, are set up as monsters by the game's fiction and mechanics until the ending A twist reveals them as the real humans. My major takeaway from playing NieR in 2021, I played the original in high school circa 2013 or 2014, is that the game is about finality and palliative care for humanity's place in a dead or dying world. Climate change already raised the oceans enough that Seafront used to be a landlocked city, and the planet is already tidally locked, so there's only endless day, which is a thing that I think we did not talk about, but is fucking wild. It's one of my favorite little story beats about this world.
I didn't
It's
even...
never... There's like 3 lines of dialogue, very nonchalant, the way that people would talk about it if that's what their lives were.
Right.
They just kind of live in the twilight band of the earth where it's like always early morning forever.
Which that was 100%. They couldn't just they didn't have time or budget for day and night cycle.
Yeah, almost certainly.
But like
right?
all games at the time were like totally like, oh, we got a day-night cycle, and this game was just like, no, fuck it, we don't.
But that's actually kind of like, I mean, because I think that is actually like, I mean, and Yoko has spoken to this, like so many decisions were informed by the fact that this game had just a really restrained budget, and even Automata, but by all amounts was not exactly a blank check either.
Yeah.
But I think it is worth that helps explain and contextualize a lot of like decisions that like go into what ends up in a game like Nier. Is like remember, like it really sounds like that, like the way the producer Saito talks about, he's like the number cruncher, just constantly stressing out, like trying to make the math work. Like especially when like it was proposed by like the Western side when Square was bringing this over, that like they should like change like the main like he's like, I thought it would work, I made it work, yeah, we could do it, fine. And it just sounds like such a stressful job. But they were like those two who have worked together for a long time now, they're also like much more open about like their process than I think a lot of other, especially Japanese creators. And it's just interesting where they are frequently talking about the budget and the money as explanations for the creative process, which is just not usually how like it's framed in games or other.
A lot, right?
Yeah, they bullshit you a lot.
I would rather this thing of like, hey, if there's a mechanical restraint or a money restraint, incorporate that into your narrative, like play with it.
It makes the world 1,000 times cooler that I didn't pick up on this little bit, but like I appreciate it all the more as a result. Why? Because why not? Who cares?
Can I tell you the thing that actually fucked me up in a way that made me almost dizzy sometimes? And I swear I'll get back to your question, Ruby, of apologies, is I noticed about 3 hours in that the skybox doesn't change. The skybox doesn't move. It can change, but the clouds don't move. And when that happened, I like would feel claustrophobic in that game. Like
I'm glad that you pointed this out when I'm never booting this game up again. Yeah, so because that would just ruin me.
It's so strange because you would think with the remake, they would have been like, let's just make it spin up there.
We're spending millions to like buff this combat. Like maybe someone could give an afternoon programmer to work on this. Can we get some of those No Man's Sky clouds in here? What's going on? Like, let's get anything that moves. No, it's all 100%. It's just it's like a matte painting up there in everywhere you go. Everywhere you go, and again, there can be different ones that load in. There can be overcast days or clear days or whatever, but there's not. There's no movement, and it fucked me up.
Sky.ping.
Anyway. Let me finish Ruby's question here. You top this all off by killing the only Gestalt that can't succumb to the Black Scrawl, dooming the remaining Gestalts and their replicants to eventually die, and confirming that humans will go extinct, which leads nicely into Automata. Do you want some clarification on that?
Yeah, I just missed the who can't succumb to the Black Scrawl.
So, the Shadow Lord.
Yeah.
See if I can get this right. The Shadow Lord is...
To be clear, that's who you play when you open the game, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And the situation with the Shadow Lord is that he is the first person who does not lose his humanity via Project Gestalt, right? That his soul has been separated from his body, and yet he maintains his selfhood. And he is the anchor around which, and I'm being metaphorical here because it's hard to get into the particulars. He is the kind of anchor that keeps the rest of the kind of kingdom of shades stable. And without him, the entire Gestalt replicant reconnection cannot happen. He is sort of like not just the blueprint of how it's going to work, but also a sort of catalyst for it, potentially, for Yona, for instance, being reconnected to her own body, right? Or again, her own body ends up being, it's not her body. That's sort of one of the lessons of this game, right? It's actually our Yona's body. It's not the original Yona's soul body or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, so the thing there is, I don't know if that's how I understand the Black Scrawl. I want to say that that the shades becoming
that's relapse.
That's the thing.
So
the thing that
Gestalt's relapse,
correct,
and
so that's
replicants
the thing that he's not
get the Black Scrawl.
Correct. So right. It's not to overcorrect Ruby,
Yeah.
but the thing that he can't succumb to is relapse. Right. Okay. Anyway, this brings me to my question, which is, out of the many, many strong themes NieR is working with, which did you all find the most compelling? Thanks for the great podcasts, Ruby. I have an answer for this, but I'd love someone else to be able to speak on this podcast because I feel like I speak too much.
Well, I would be curious. Dia, you've played this game twice, so and maybe you played NieR multiple times. I don't know.
Yeah.
The extent that, but like, what's the one that I guess for you? Like, what's the one that endures? Like, when someone asks you like, what do you like about NieR? Like, what is the bit that first comes to mind, having spent twice, 3 times as many hours as Austin and I have?
It's really funny because like it really is one of those things where I will kind of like get on a groove and focus on one every time I play it. And even like for the different playthroughs, like, like the last time I played it, it's the only reason you didn't get, a review that's centered around that was because I was just like emotionally burnt out and didn't feel like having to brush up on gestaltism, but like this time, like the whole time I was sitting there, I was like, oh shit, yeah, like I see what's going on here. Like, just like viewing it through a Gestalt psychology lens and just being like, oh, okay, yes, I see, like, like what things are happening here that relate to closure and symmetry and continuity and past experience and all these things. And like, but like, I think for me, that's kind of why I love NieR as a tech so much, is that there isn't just one theme that really sticks out. It is something that I can pick up and go through and just be like, even just picking it up for like a couple hours and putting it down again, like not even finishing Route A and just going, yeah, like I got something out of that again. And like, I think, also like, I guess this time the big theme that really came close to me was the sense of caretaking and that kind of whole arc of the caretaker identity. Really came through the most.
I think for me, a lot of the characters are dealing with trying to like accepting what is their sort of like lot in life. Like what are you here to do? What are like the boundary walls that are around you, and which ones can you push on, and which ones can't you push on? Which ones are just sort of like there? And like I consider myself to be like I'm like a very pragmatic person. I like spend a lot of time figuring out like what are the walls around me and what are the ones that I can push on to make me happier, and what are the ones that like that just is what it is. Like I just have to accept that is like like an immovable object, and I struggle with that because it's at the same time that can like lead to a certain amount of like complacency, and it can lead to a certain amount of like just accepting things for what they are when they could be different. And so I resonated a lot in this game where like all especially like a character like Emil, like as you change over life and like how you come to terms with what you are, and like what does that even mean? What does it mean to what you are? And like that is a huge like overarching theme of the series in general, like in humanity, robotics, and yada yada yada. Like there's a lot of that in a lot of Yoko's work that he's doing in these games, and I definitely found that to be the one that I struck with the most, especially because like I'm in this situation where I'm glad that this version is the original vision. At the same time, like Dia, you're talking about like resonating more when it's the sibling. It's like, well, I resonate more when it's the the father taking care of a daughter.
Because when we were talking about it, you were talking about playing it. I'm just like, no, you're doing the wrong one, Patrick.
No, it's just interesting because when you were speaking earlier about sort of like the identity of the caretaker, and that is certainly true. Like as a father. And I think something that parents struggle with a lot is you have to do so much invisible work for a child that you can't explain to them that you're doing.
And then they tell you, Daddy, I hate you.
Well, right. And also I think parents get a complex, and I work really hard to not have this or to push against it, is I think it's very easy for parents then to feel, well, they need to start explaining to their children, like, well, the shit I did for you, motherfucker, like, you better appreciate it. Which is like, no, in a lot of cases, you chose to have children. You chose to have this burden. And, like, it's not your responsibility to then push that burden onto your children so they can appreciate it. They didn't ask to come into this world. You brought them here, you asshole. So appreciate the situation. And so I can, that is something that I think about a lot as a parent, is like, yes, like, there's a lot of invisible work I do for my children. They don't need to like wear that burden with me. That is the one that I chose for myself. So that's an interesting like little bit that I like a thematic framing that I lose just for my own personal experience that I bring to it. But yeah, wrapping it around the one about like finding your place, accepting it, but then finding ways to like move the boulder, I think is the one that I resonated with the most in the game.
The thing that I think I kept messaging you about, Patrick, was like, what the fuck is this game doing with the history of games, and especially games about horror or monsters specifically? Because you get this run in the very first playthrough, some of it in the Young Boy NieR stuff, where this is a game that references through gameplay mechanisms, old text adventure games, in some ways anticipating the Twine Revolution, which was going to hit.
I wrote down multiple times Twine in that section.
Yeah. Let me tell you what the people I know who liked to make things in Twine a decade ago, those motherfuckers loved Drakengard and NieR. So, but also Resident Evil, the first time that you go to Emil's mansion, I like was ready for a dog to burst through a window, but like you lose camera control. It becomes fixed camera angles. You are walking around that. You're literally looking for like crests or whatever to open doors.
The moon key.
Like that's just the moon key and the sun key or whatever. Diablo, as it takes on an isometric perspective, and it becomes just like
I love
the
that.
most
That's
hack
the
and slash.
section.
That dungeon rules. One of the best parts of the DLC, the Mother's Diary stuff. What is that actually called? 13 Doors, or I don't remember what it's actually called.
Chronicles of the Lost World or some shit like that.
Yeah, that's what it is. It is.
The recycled world.
The recycled world is that you get to redo that dungeon and get a ton of loot when you do it. The rest of that DLC stuff is not good. You have to do it to get the weapons, but unfortunately. But yeah, and then it's not all of them. It's the text adventure, it's the Resident Evil, it's the Diablo. And then the ship, which is new, has kind of a point and click adventure vibe almost, as you're looking for keys and stuff. And all of those, it's like the history of games is at play here, which again goes back, Cado, to what you were saying about Devlo and Popola as rule keepers, or game, like the boundaries of the game are defined by them and your story. And in many ways, the thing that this reminded me of, and predates now by a number of years, is Kentucky Route Zero and its relationship with like old school adventure games and just trying to like play inside of the space of the kind of grammar of other games. That's something I praised KRZ for a lot, and I still praise it for, but I wish I'd seen that NieR was doing it this dramatically here first. And I don't have a thesis for this yet that I feel strong enough about to be like, and this is what it's doing. I think that there's something to say about games as meaning-making structures, the kind of like ways in which we put rules on top of the world, or the ways in which stories are structured in terms of game mechanics. Things like, inside of that first text adventure, or maybe not the first one. The first time you go into the Forest of Myth and you talk to the three people, there's the one that like straight up feels like, it again feels like a Resident Evil situation where you're going through a castle. And it's like, do you go east, west, north, east, or west, right? And obviously this is pulling from an entire era of text adventures, like Zork and stuff like that. But like, if you go to the wrong places too many times, you just die in there and it kicks you out and you have to start over process of elimination, figuring out the way forward. Yeah. There's even a little, classic, A, B, and C all say the other ones are lying puzzle to do in there, which I got that on my first try. I felt very smart. I felt like, oh yeah, I nailed that shit. And so yeah, that's my favorite thing that has been one of my favorite things to unpack. And in some ways, let's say, with ending E, it also looks forward to Automata in terms of visuals, right? And so it's even playing with its own gamic history there, ludic history there. And so like, I think there's something there for me to work through and find a better thesis on. So, go ahead.
I want to jump in on it because this is something that I always been thinking about the entire time I'm playing it, is that it like really does quote, like sometimes I think, like the Spencer Mansion is just direct Resident Evil quote, or Emil's mansion is the Spencer
room,
mansion.
The long dining room is just 100%.
It's just that.
The blood sink.
The blood sink. Yes.
Which also turns on by itself every time you walk into that room after the fact, which is very funny to me.
But like, so, one of the things that I was thinking through this time is that like, the text adventures, they're not good text adventures. The Zelda block puzzles that you get.
Right, Zelda. Zelda, obviously the other big one, by the way. Just the whole game is just Zelda, right?
Well, because it was Yoko Taro watched Evangelion and played Ocarina of Time. I was like, I can do that.
Honestly, king. Let's go.
But, like the block puzzles, they're not good block puzzles. The riddles.
The fact that it's the same one in the post
I was going to say, but
every
upon the seventh time, you can really appreciate the nuance and the way those...
Like the riddles that he uses are just the most like they're the basic riddles. We get what? We get like the Sphinx's riddle.
And then when you have to do them again and it switches and you have to pay attention to the numbers and the
it's a reading it's like a third grade reading comprehension test. All right, how many soldiers did she have with her?
Well, so then it became a game for me where it's like I'm holding circle to fast forward through it and I'm just trying to catch it as it goes through. And so when I'd get it, it's like blue, got it. Like 40 something. Well, I think I only needed the 4. That's probably good enough, and I'll get it at the end.
Oh, it's so good. But I also always picked the same Yona answer when I was picking. There's a third one.
I always went the one at the bottom.
The third one. It's the closest. It's the one that's closest together.
So anyway, I really love that. Like, there is not a lot of attention paid to these elements. It's just the fact that they're there. It's like when we switch perspectives, it's not crucial that we're switching perspectives in camera. It's just the fact that we could do it and we are doing it here. And figure out what that means. Like, it's just like, go spend your time thinking about that if you want to. Or don't. It might not mean a goddamn thing.
I mean, again, this is, I come back to the mansion, Emil's mansion so much for this because it is just a Resident Evil mansion, and then underneath it is a Resident Evil mansion because there's a secret weapons lab underneath, by the way. And instead of it being where you learn about the Tyrant Project or Nemesis or whatever, you literally learn about a weapon project where there are weaponized people, and that person joins your party. Right. Yeah. So like it is doing something that I think is there's something shallow about what if the monsters all joined your party, and you realize they're people. But where I think that the game works for me is that's not enough to prevent conflict from happening. Right.
Right.
That's not enough to stop tragedy from happening. And there's something about that really does speak to me in this game.
Because there's always another, right? Like, right?
Yes,
you're picking who you're choosing to like create this, found family circle, and then that's actually the theme that I'm kind of the most interested. Just having played the first one is the idea of how the creation of the self also kind of makes the creation of the other happen, right? Like, because the fucking replicants, which are supposed to be just shells, make a self, like then they other the shades, which normally the shades were supposed to just, the gestalt were supposed
to be people, right?
Be people and be in those shells that were supposed to be empty. But because they, I don't. Is that just
heartless,
like deep lore?
Occasionally,
right?
Yes. In fact, we should just jump to this next question because I know Dia, you have a lot to say about this one, and I think it connects nicely to what Cado is setting up here. Let me find it here. Sorry, it's a little bit further down. Someone said it there. Okay, here it is. This comes in from Brock, who says, I don't know if y'all taking questions for the NieR Replicant Spoilercast, but I just finished Route E, and I was really excited by a bit of Inside Austin game in the last Waypoint Radio and had to write in. Trying to keep it brief, I'll say, I really enjoyed the game and found the emotional beats of the character arcs very satisfying, but was left disappointed with how vague and unexplained so much of the lore and background information remains by the end. After getting the E ending, I went and read the fan translation of the Grimoire NieR companion book, which very directly and plainly lays out a ton of the story that's hardly present in the game. It's left me kind of perplexed at the discrepancy between what you get from the game as its own artistic piece versus how much more of the story there is to be found elsewhere. What are y'all's thoughts on how much information is presented to the players within the game versus how much of it has to be found elsewhere? Do you think that the player needs the full timeline of events to appreciate the story? Do you feel that things have reached a satisfying conclusion by the end? Is it somehow the point that if they haven't, where is the line for you on it being thematic to not know the full context versus the experience of just legitimately lacking something in the end? Best wishes, keep up the good work, and fuck capitalism. Brock. Dia, you saw this question and had some thoughts last night to me when I first dropped it in there.
Yeah, well, because, I guess my basic answer is just like, no. Like, I don't think this needs to be in there. And like, when I remember the first time, I played NieR, I didn't know who the Hamlin organization was, or Legion, or the Red Eyes, or any of this other stuff that I have since.
Accord is someone who pops up in like in a loading screen. You're like, who the fuck is Accord?
Yeah.
And then if you know via other game shit, and I think even the Emil backstory stuff connects to the Accord Corporation or something. So
Accord never shows up in the other playthroughs?
No, absolutely not.
Right.
No, none of this shows
It's not
up.
that game.
Yeah.
And I think then that's the important thing, is that like, this isn't that game. One of my big things is like, I love all the item descriptions in Dark Souls. I have read all of them. I pay attention to the changes between
You hear
versions.
that, Patrick?
Patrick and I, we have fought about this a million times on our DMs.
I just don't care. You go
100% of my DMs are me telling Patrick, "Fuck you, read the item description."
That is true. I exist in life to play games in a way that functionally makes Dia extremely upset at all times.
If you want a hard combat game, go fucking play Ninja Gaiden Black.
I can do both. I can do both.
But like, so it's not that I don't love I don't love the deep lore, and I don't love kind of like putting the pieces together and just kind of playing with them. But NieR is not that story. Like, and this is what I think about, like, Yoko Taro and the Evangelion connection. It's just like, we don't need to know what this sort of like, the Spear of Longinus is. Like, it's just sick. It's like you just like, it's like there's like this character named Accord, and like, who the fuck is Accord? I don't know. Sounds sick. The Hamlin Corporation with their secret lab. Sounds sick. Like, sometimes things just can just be. And like, that is where like I land with NieR, is that like, just let these things flavor the text that you are like, world building isn't there to give you an encyclopedic history of the world. It is there to present a stage for these characters to operate in. And like, I think NieR works really well. Honestly, one of my things that like about the Replicant 1.22 whatever, is that it added too much texture and detail to the world. I didn't need all the grass. I didn't need all of this, like, the population. Before, it was this kind of, it was a memory. It was a stage.
Which goes back to speaking about what you said before about it being received history versus being a thing that we think of as actively happening currently.
Right. And it was an impression of a zone, which, like, the original, like, like the northern fields are supposed to just basically be Hyrule Field, and it's like Hyrule Field. We couldn't put a lot of stuff in that. It was the N64, but like, PlayStation 3, we could have put more in there, but not really. And so now we've got this big lush, environment. I'm kind of, it almost pulls me back even more, because I'm like, no. I want the even more reduced version of this, because this is a stage play more than, if this is a kind of like, an active text, it is a stage play more than anything else. And I want that impression rather than, the kind of, realism of it.
That is how it hits me too. I've raged against the kind of wikification of fiction that has grown for years now. Like, going back to, like, I think I'm writing about this with my Undertale review, that one of my least favorite things about then the kind of growing fandom of that game was the desire to catalog. Undertale is a game that, like, so badly wants you to understand that cataloging is one of the ways in which you end up, like, trying to catalog people, and that impulse should be resisted, and then to have all of the possible dialogue variations and endings and everything else, and secrets and digging through code to try to find true information felt so antithetical to what that game's themes were. And I I feel that more largely because it often comes hand in hand with the sense that a text can be solved. That if only you lay out all of the details in chronological order, you'll arrive at the true reading. I think there's value in looking at building worlds where there's lots of detail across many different sources also. So something like Grimoire Noir existing, Grimoire Nier existing, is valuable in the sense that it's a space where someone like Yoko Taro can tell parts of this story in another format and delve into parts of it that are not in Nier itself, but their absence from Nier does not mean that the decision to not foreground all of the kind of grimy details of the Gestalt program is not a lack. It's a decision to background that stuff and focus and draw the player's attention instead onto the stuff that is thematically resonant and core, which is about personal relationships, right? There is no point at which, I mean, you get this information at the end of your run when you're too deep in to do anything with it anyway, right? You get this information, or Nier literally gets this information. Like the main character, who, by the way, Yoko Taro said is not named Nier. I will always just call him Nier, but like I've read an interview with him where he was like, no, that's not the name of the character. It can't be Nier, which is very funny. But
what is Nier then?
The protagonist.
But he says it's not the protagonist.
Yeah.
He says it's not.
Yeah.
I
bet okay.
But which I think the Cass wrote in and said Noir plus Weiss equals Nier, but it's spelled wrong. It's Neir. That's not. It doesn't work. Anyway.
Also, that
how do you spell
forgets
Weiss?
Rubrum.
Weiss.
Yeah.
Weiss.
Yeah.
I never even looked at those documents.
Take the EI. Oh wait, IE.
Yeah,
never mind. I'm sorry. Ignore me.
That's fine. Yeah, I know.
And it leaves that rubrum.
But I do think that there is I'm not someone who needs it laid out for me in that way. Not because I'm and that's not me saying I'm good at putting things together. That's me saying I like, and even as a storyteller, I like to not have to put things together in that way and instead invoke an emotional response without it being tied to
this fandom has some of that though. Like there's a reason that Yoko went out and did interviews on Undertale's behalf when that game was getting a Japanese localization. That's part of the A4 connection. They asked him to do some of that.
That's funny. Okay,
yeah, A4 published Undertale in Japan.
And I think that there's two different things. There's the desire to connect different works together in a broad sense, which I'm also guilty of as a storyteller.
Right. I guess I was speaking more to the fandom's desire to explain. Like, you cannot go into a Nier thread without like a bunch of people being like, "Aha! Like I'm here to explain like the stage play that like you didn't," and not even necessarily in a like you're wrong for not understanding, as much as like no, there are answers and like they're important, like and we should discuss them. And it's just interesting how. Like Yoko seems both interested in telling lots of stories, doing lots of world building, but not necessarily the way it's like foreground for the player or like the hierarchy of like who will encounter that and in what form. Less interested in like even like talking to John Riccardi, like it was one of the localizers on all of these games, like going back to the original Nier. Like he mentioned at one point in my interview that they would have a question about something and then he would go, "All right. So here's how this actually works." And then the moment I brought that up, like Riccardi actually got like he was like, I don't know. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have, mentioned that because like, I think there is an understanding that like, even though like a lot of this isn't true of like every game world or every just world building that like creators work on, but it's often the case they know more about the mechanics of it than is actually foregrounded in the work itself. And like, this seems to be what was implied to me from Riccardi, and what is I think is implied by a lot of Yoko's work in general is that he knows a lot more than is actually here. Like he has really deeply thought about the timeline, the mechanics of this world, and how it exactly it all fits together. But there is a reluctance to even admit that is the case because I think there is the fandom around this series is a little. I'll be so curious to see what happens next for that reason because now like. It's like Nier was sort of like a weird thing, a weird cult classic. Like Automata became like you know, like in this, you know, the grand scheme of things, like a pretty big game. It's so, you know, millions of copies. Like, and like, so then what does a creator like that do next with its fandom, with that world? Like, I don't know. Like, and it makes me so curious to see how Yoko himself interprets his own fandom that he has now inherited.
Right. What's the game that does to NieR Automata what Automata was doing to NieR? Right. Which NieR was doing to Ava and Zelda and Resident Evil, etc. We should keep on moving because we do have a lot of questions here. Here's a quick one from Uzziah who says, "Don't worry if you remember. When you beat NieR Automata, one of the pods says, 'Thank you for playing NieR Automata,' in the way that Austin has been saying it. They don't say automata, they say automata.
Thank you.
Pardon my pronunciation, guys. I'm not a linguist or whatever. Thank you for the pod and your work. Thank you, Uzziah. I really appreciate that.
We're gonna stick to that canonical
every time
interpretation.
Yukotaro says it, like I'm just like, yeah, he says automata.
Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate this. I feel better now.
Yeah, I refuse. It's never going to be automata.
It feels right. Automata, it's good. Anyway, David writes in and says, as someone who played the original NieR several years before playing Automata in 2017, I was curious to gain the perspective of people like Austin and Patrick who had not played the original when they played Automata. Now that you've finished Replicant, do you feel as though you have any new perspective or insights into the events of Automata? I ask this because after getting ending E of Replicant, I decided to play through Automata again, and as I go through it, I'm trying to consider how they would have responded to some of these scenes that are directly calling back to the original game. For example, I had an intensely powerful reaction to seeing Kaine's home surrounded by lunar tears while her music played, but I have to imagine most people who saw that scene were left confused, since most Automata players did not play the original. Does that scene or any others feel different to you now? Thanks for reading. Love the podcast. Yeah, that's a big one. Likewise, all the Emil stuff, which does
Devil
have
and Popola. I can't
Popola.
imagine the response that people were like, what? You know,
totally.
Like that must have been I just saw 2 androids. And it's like, okay, this is a game about androids anyway. Like, not gonna blink at this.
Yeah, I guess I did something in another village somewhere. Weird. Seems rough. The masks. So I started replaying Automata before, like a week ago, basically, just to get my feelings right on this and feel what that game plays like. It plays so differently. I think that they just feel like different games. Also because just the level design is so different, right? Like this game feels like an adventure game in terms of its dungeon design a little bit more. Not because there's puzzles you're solving, but like discrete rooms in a different Automata really feels like a character action game and not a particularly great character action game in terms of like, what do I do in this room? Oh, I just fight too many enemies. Okay. In any case, almost immediately I ran across the first thing you do in that game basically is go out into the desert and run across all of the desert machines who are all wearing the fucking masks from Facade.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all the Facade mask. It's the King's mask specifically.
Actually, Cado, I needed to send you the article, like the 10 things that connect there, that I sent to Austin that can give you some of these moments without having to replay the game yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
More than that, it's just the thing that I said before, which is like thinking about 2B and 9S in relation to characters and A2, but I've not gotten to play as A2 yet in my Automata replay.
I like the span of the. I love the fact that these stories take place over thousands, tens of thousands of years. It's a convenient way to essentially have like different worlds that exist on the same timeline without having to, worry too much about. It is
laughing because he knows that this is a thing I do.
Yeah,
Friends at the Table. In our sci-fi story, we've done a number of. Let's call this 50,000 years later. Don't worry.
It lets you do both, right? Like it lets you be. It lets you retcon where you want to retcon. It lets you connect where you want to connect without having to do like the hard work of like what happened. And that's fine. I think, but it still makes it. Like, I love that those connections exist. I love that, like, this universe exists on, like, a time span greater than, like, you can, like, sort of conceive right in front of your eyes. And, but that also means that, yes, I guess I, in theory, miss that I didn't see those connections. But that's also the beauty of Automata is that, like, it exists as a self-contained thing that is deeply satisfying and interesting and is only just richer for those connections that I now experience in a different way. I'm not going to replay Automata most likely, but I now Automata is a richer text for having played NieR, even if I didn't have the like, you know, OMG fan moment, which itself is, I think, something that, you know, like, well, I want to say that like Yoko avoids, but he also has like Emil's head, like, you know, like turning into a giant, like rolling all over the landscape. So like he seems to enjoy both producing those connections and then teasing the audience's relationship with them, which is what makes me so curious about his future work, is like, what does he do to kind of like knife the players in different ways now that they have like this broad spectrum of connections to his world. I
just want to note that this game does the time jump random amount of years thing immediately, and it's like, that is actually the first thing I messaged you was 1412 years later. Just like, what a great
and it's not even a like, and it's so subtle too, because it's most games would do like a clean break like 1500 years later. Like the fact that it's like a very specific number is itself telling in the choosing, and I delighted in that being something that happens in the first 15 minutes of the game. It's like, hey, here's a bunch of mechanics. We're gonna throw them away because you're gonna have to kind of start over again anyway. And then here's an arbitrary number we're gonna jump to. It's
so great. Austin, how did the school buses and the skyscrapers in Automata hit you now? Because it really cracks me. Like when I first played it, I was just like, this is fucking brilliant and also just ridiculous.
It's very funny because it's like, because Automata is what, another 5,000 years, right? Or something post
10,000.
It jumps to an alien invasion.
Yeah, it jumps to post an alien invasion.
Yeah, correct.
During which time Emil turned. This is the thing I had to look up, because I was like, I want to really remember this Emil shit, because I didn't remember how Emil was presented. In my mind, Emil in Automata was the Emil who bounces away at the end of Route B.
That's what I thought, yeah.
That's not true.
Yeah, I know.
The Emil in Automata is a baby Emil. Emil cloned himself to fight aliens. And in
of course,
Emil
would do anything.
Of course.
Sure.
And in the process, Emil's memories became hazier and hazier.
Isn't that the whole, like, that's the arc of, like, I never unlocked any of that stuff in Automata, but isn't that the whole thing, like, you don't give him his old memories, but you're like,
no,
you're like rescuing him for the future.
You're almost like giving him a connection back to remember the people he missed, right? Or that subversion of him missed. And obviously that is now we know, or I guess you knew at the time was kind of NieR and Vice. But the actual thing, there's like a little cutscene of like a bunch of NieR heads or a bunch of Emil heads fighting aliens. It's very fun. Not a cutscene.
Emil
like
heads.
Mural.
Once I get the vaccine, I got to go out to the club with my fellow Emil heads. And
we're out here. So yeah, that connection too, I think is, and just, I think that there's seeing all of that shit first presented here, both in the opening sequence of like, this is what the world looked like in modernity. And then also you go back there in the stupid DLC shit. You go back there and have like a fight in a basketball court or something in the NieR DLC. Like, what was this? Did they just build this basketball court? Also, we talked about this, Patrick, the shooting gallery fight or a level of the diary DLC.
I love that shit.
I think
it's so funny.
I think I messaged you and I was like, it's so wonderful how the NieR team left in this summer interns work into the game so that we could all experience it into the DLC. Like, and alongside the like remix that someone like,
all of that music, all of those remixes.
My kid made a remix of one of the songs. There's like a way we could sneak this into the game, and it's like, we'll mash it up with this really bad.
Patrick, that's a whole album. There is a whole remix album.
Of course
there is. There's a couple on Apple Music. I've been listening to them when I've been writing lately.
Actually, this is a question that we didn't get emailed, but Dia, do you remember the original soundtrack? And like, how do you feel that this new version of it kind of sits in comparison?
Yeah, I do remember. It was actually funny because like, I did the audio logs, this game soundtrack column for Paste last year, and so one of the second one I did was on the NieR Replicant soundtrack, which I knew was the NieR Replicant soundtrack because my friend imported it and we listened to it in her car. And so like that really is a very like kind of formative memory for me. I guess not a formative memory, but a very powerful memory for me. So like I didn't mind it. It was not I was very vocal of my criticisms of the remaster or the remake Dark Souls or Demon Souls soundtrack.
Right. Yeah.
Because for me, it doesn't work. That is such a, non-orchestral, non-live instrument album soundtrack originally. But for this, I think it worked. I don't know that it necessarily, and you can go back and you can change it later. I don't know what point you can actually unlock the original. I guess it's after E. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I think it's when you restore your save file for E. But I think it works both ways. I think for this one, it's similar enough. Like it is like much like this game. It is, it recalls the original in the way that like it has updated it and like kind of fits in better in some regards, I think, with this more kind of slightly more realistic version of Nier.
It's like if you're going to add the grass texture, right, or you're going to add the grass models, then maybe a lusher vocal track on this song does fit a little bit better because it's not such a sparse looking game at this point.
Yeah.
That's a case. You can make that case. I don't know if I buy it, but you can make it,
Yeah, like it's one of those things where it's just kind of like, I'm just kind of like, like I don't, I don't know that like it really makes that much of a difference for this game either way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, soundtrack rips.
Soundtrack rips. Like it just does. It's just very good. Justin writes in, says, "Hello, NieR Spoilercast. There's a detail in NieR Gestalt that is completely not there in Replicant due to a developer mistake. In the original NieR development, the birthday for the protagonist is listed as June 6th, Yoko Taro's birthday, most likely a placeholder. Replicant, however, did not replace this placeholder, so in both the original Japanese release and the 1.22 re-release, this was the birthday of the young protagonist. Gestalt, however, changed it to what was eventually decided upon, September 11th. Though some claim this is to honor the 2003 release date of Drakengard 1, this is hard to believe given the portion of the presentation below, and this is a link out to a Silicon Era summary of a GDC talk. This is Making Weird Games for Weird People, which a lot of people have sent in things saying, go watch the Making Weird Games for Weird People talk that Yoko Taro did at GDC in 2014, I want to say. This is from the piece. This is not a direct quote from Yoko Taro. This is someone summarizing part of the talk. For NieR's design, he revealed, he was deeply influenced by the events of 9/11 and the world thereafter. 9/11 was an unfortunate event that triggered out of a situation where both sides believed they were doing the right thing. The question is, what did they see from their point of view? What does it look like from each other's perspectives? These were the thoughts that went on through his head while he was making NieR. I just thought this would be an interesting discussion, interesting for the podcast to discuss, Justin. I could see him thinking that. And I could see the September 11th birthday for Papa NieR being intentional in that way, given that. Yeah. That adds up. Good detail to know. Brian writes in and they say, they have a bunch of questions here. And we're going to blow through them. Now that you've had a chance to get to know Emil better, sorry, I should note. I should do these questions credit. Hello, I have 3 questions for the NieR Spoilercast. Question A, Emil's fate, and fate, the A in fate is capitalized, as if it's an ending. Now that you've had the chance to get to know Emil better, how has your opinion of him changed compared to your initial impressions from him in Automata as the secret boss / failed defender of the earth / wandering shopkeeper? How do you feel about how things end up for him by the time of the Machine Wars? I love Emil with my whole fucking heart. I'd take a bullet for Emil right now.
Yeah, he's delightful. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have it more than, the arc of, I think, probably for a lot of people, the arc of understanding Emil is what's with the designer that wears that, like, creepy looking mask. And then, which is probably something you were aware of before you played NieR Automata, which is, that was my, like, first encountering, was just, like, this game designer that wears this mask. Like, oh, okay, I guess everyone needs a fucking bit. It's hard to get noticed these days. Which is true. If it quite literally was only that, it's like functionally, gets you attention. But like a lot of things with Yoko, it's deeper than that. And then like playing Automata and being like, oh, okay, well then it's just a funny shot. The arc of like coming to this game and then like having that character become a whole person. With like the tragic backstory, involving him and especially involving his sister is awesome. Like again, I think it like speaks to, again, like before, like I don't feel like playing Automata was like a lesser experience not knowing who Emil was, but it's much richer to have played, experience and think back on all of those now knowing, what Emil went through to get to the place that, he's at the end. My favorite tiny little bit is when he appears at the end of during Route E and he just has extra arms and it's just like, why do you have why do you have 6 arms? Don't worry about it. It's just the way but also the fact that it's even brought up also just speaks to this is just such a game where such ridiculous things are happening, and also to have characters that comment them as a play in a kind of a player surrogate perspective, but a much more aggressive, almost like forum troll perspective is just such a delight.
The arc for Emil for me of here is someone who is afraid of looking at people, of observing the world, because in observation there is touch, and that he sees his touch as, his touch is a weapon, literally, when you first meet him, but is him contending with that fear, then moving to being a person who is afraid of being perceived, and needing to reckon with that, and seeing the characters in his life recognize who he is, despite now having his weapon, I guess his sister's weapon body, which also brings in all sorts of questions around gender. Obviously, we also get the kind of admission, the more direct admission in this version, in this translation, that Emil's deeply attracted to NieR, and is at least bi, but my read is definitely just extremely gay for NieR, which go for it, why not? All of that stuff is produces a character who has a lot of depth, given how late he shows up in the first half of the game. When he first shows up in the first half, the end of Route A, it's he's just hanging with us now. We just met this kid. Is he really just around? And then within an hour, you're no one should ever separate me from Emil again. Emil's core crew, ride or die, let's go. Those are the only cutscenes I never skipped were the Airy, the post-Airy destruction scene with Emil, and the final dedication sacrifice Emil scene. I won't skip either of those ever. I love him too much. Also, Emil is just the NieR Replicant thesis statement. If you want the rewards of being loved, you must submit to the mortifying ordeal of being known. That is literally what it is. It's just all right there.
Shit.
Which is funny because then we have, Yoko Taro wearing the Emil mask.
Right. Right.
Which is both, I buy the the whole being known thing, and then also it's this is an expectation about wanting to be known. Yoko.
Yeah, totally. It goes back to the double bind of the caretaker, right? That is this about protecting your identity and allowing yourself to have access to a certain type of love and anonymity? It's the second time this week I've said anonymity instead of anonymity. Or is having a certain type of nominee, or is this about drawing attention to yourself and kind of taking control of the story that is told about you? It's interesting. Anyway, question B: subs or dubs with capital B's? I did not. This question is about if you like the Japanese or English voice track more, and specifically calls out something that I didn't know about until Patrick, you told me about it, which is that in Japanese, Kaine's swearing is censored, but it's uncensored in English. Would the shit hog line still have resonated as much with you if you'd heard it bleeped out and had to guess what she said?
A bleep? The bleep kind of implies a regular word you already know, right?
Yes.
We know that word and it's a bad word. Yeah.
Shithead.
Well, it's funny. So when I interviewed Riccardi, I asked, we spent a lot of time talking about the swears because I think it's fascinating that oftentimes A4 itself and other localization groups are accused of, censoring Japanese creators when they, bring their games over, as opposed to, working alongside them and trying to find ways so broader audiences can understand their work. And often that is in the frame of highly sexualized characters. But in this case was Yoko has spoken in interviews where he the whole reason the game, the censoring is a commentary on Japanese society, like zone censoring, and he thought it would be funny to then censor his own work. And then when Square and 8.4 got involved, they thought looked at that and they're like, I think people are just gonna think it's weird that it's censored. Like, it's one thing if you're doing it for effect, like once or twice, like a bleep can be funny, and then they settled on just having the actual explicit swearing. But anyway, that's a long version of getting to. I'd asked, it was like, well, what's in the original Japanese script then, right? Like, is it just a bleep? Is it just a censored, or is there did Yoko write a bunch of swears in the original script and then they were censored? And I was not given an answer because the original Japanese script has not been made public, and they were very sensitive to disclosing exactly, which makes me think that Yoko's written some swears in there, and that definitely I have been trying on the side. I've been trying on the side to. There was a second piece I wanted to do out of the localization stuff. Was I just wanted to know the origins of shithog, because I thought that was like a funny way of just speaking more broadly about the way swears are deployed in that game, and like what role of that is the original writer, or is that the localizer, and how do those things mash up? And that has not played out yet. I believe the last we left, it was trying to get Yoko to explain shithog, and I don't know if I'll actually get the answer on that, but that is
my fingers for you.
Thank you. It's a fascinating part about that whole game's creative look.
Last question here from Brian. Favorite place. What is your favorite place with a C in it in NieR? Mine is the Forest of Myth because ... etc.
It's not the junk heap. That's not you.
Mine's the junk heap. Absolutely.
Come on.
Mine is definitely the junk heap.
You probably spent 40 hours in the junk heap.
I love the junk heap. This is I don't know if you saw this exchange, but I did that whole thing. I did that series of tweets about gardening and trying to get my pink flowers and the lunar tear and etc. And the third one was, I've run the junk heap in NieR so many times now that I almost did it during my lunch break today out of habit. I don't need anything in there ever again at this point, but it's just so comforting. And Jackson from Abnormal Mapping and Great Gundam Project at Head Falls Off said, this threat, damn. Shout outs. Yep. I love Jackson from Great Gundam Project. Wow, can't wait for Turning Gundam. Jackson said, this thread is now one post off from a complete NieR weapons story. And so I did add bash clank. I don't miss my garden anymore. Bash clank. The heap is warm and solid. Bash clank. The flowers outside are frail and weak. Bash clank. Metal flowers are strong and metal. And then I added verdant murmur. Damage 743. Magic power 50%. Weight heavy. That's my complete weapon story. You can go find that thread. It's the Austin weapon. Verdant, whatever I said, murmur. I think the junk heap. Running the junk heap I would run that shit right now. That feels good. That sounds great. It's like having a good jogging route. You know what I mean? Where you're like, I know that this just feels like home to me. Other favorite places.
Oh God, it's so hard for me to choose because I have reasons for each one. I'm the Eyrie, the first time you get to the Eyrie, and it's just it is haunting in a way that very few games have actually captured the sense of just alienation. You go there and you feel bad. Mm-hmm. There are a few places, even Dark Souls doesn't really get the sense of or Bloodborne. It's the sense of being shut out of a community. So
I'm afraid
immediately.
Of clowns, I'm afraid of small towns. I don't want to be,
Yeah. But I think it's probably Facade. Facade is that's.
I was gonna say Facade too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Facade grew on me once I gave up on the fast travel in Facade and started running over rooftops and jumping my way from place to place instead of using the boat. It grew on me a lot.
The thing is Fira's tour is so crucial to me. That was such a weird emotional moment for me in both times I played the game. That it's just there's just here's this weird, strange little brown girl who doesn't speak that is going to walk you through this very weird town that is built of sand and run by sand, and everything is sand and everyone wears masks and there are weird rules, and she's going to be this weird tour guide that you know, and there's like, you just hear those little footsteps that she makes through the city. And it's just like, no, this is the like thing works for me the most in this entire game.
The bit where you're like, you can tell her to stop giving you the tour. Like, I'd never in my life would have noticed that.
Unfollow me right the fuck now if you skipped her tour. Goddamn.
Look, like, yeah, like, you know, I'll gladly kill Sif before I tell Fira to stop taking the tour.
Well, good news. You get to both kill Sif and see Fira die in this game, unfortunately. Sif kills Fira. That's my fan theory. Patrick, your favorite place in this game?
No, the Airy was definitely
the Airy.
Mine.
Yeah.
That's just, it just feel like that's when I think of NieR. I was always happy to go back to that place just because, well, it's like actually like kind of fun to explore. Like it has a different like the level design itself, like with the bridges,
climbing ladders, trying to jump over. There's a lot of like I want to jump down to.
I did that. I constantly, especially because like there's like a weird weight to the falling.
Yeah,
in NieR like, where I don't, platformers are like the genre, so I feel like I have a pretty high level of competence, like a good floor to work with when I'm jumping around in a game. And every time I leapt off one of those bridges, like I feel like I'm sinking like a fucking rock, and I don't know that I can properly guide it. And like, especially when I was, it's one of those things you do when you're doing like repetitive actions, is like you try and find little things to, whether it's like a podcast or getting through the world in a slightly different way. That was always my thing when I got to the area, was like, all right, like what weird path can I take? Like, how can I make a riskier jump, off of the ledge in this area? And just the whole look of it is just so striking. That's always
it's really cool.
It was just really cool to just constantly rotate the camera around.
Getting that speedrun achievement for that boss fight actually feels like it was the thing that it most relied on, was the moment when it's Emil's like, I'll hold it back. And then you're like, all right, I have to go get over to that other bridge as quick as possible to try to shoot this thing in the red spot on its back.
Like to speak to that, I'm not a trophy. I treat trophies like I treat like a Cado talking side quest, where it's like I like to do them if I can do them like reasonably along the path that I'm already doing, but I'm rarely gonna go out of my way to actually to unlock them. But I thought it was cool that like different games would have gated that behind like an initial playthrough, right? Like, you could only get this if you do it the first time. And actually what NieR says, like, yeah, are you like wildly overpowered and like you've played this game 3 times? We're still gonna get you a trophy, and maybe the game is, it knows you can't actually get that the first playthrough, and that's how it's. But like, there are just different games that would have made that more of a hardcore, like capital G gamer achievement, and I got, I don't know, like 6 or 7 of those just by the nature of like playing.
Yeah, by the time you get to Route C, you're just so strong. that you can just burn through things, which feels
and those
good.
felt satisfying because it actually did. That was actually an instance in which the like arbitrary trophy system, maybe if not on purpose, but felt like it was commentating on that repetitive aspect, where like, hey, you can only get this because you've done like this multiple times and have thus become powerful enough to do this at the speed that you're doing it. And I enjoyed getting those, even if I don't care if I get 100% of them. They were satisfying every time one popped.
Yeah, it was nice to like just hit that. Like, I did not complete the achievements. I didn't even really try, but every time I was up against the boss, I was like, okay, let me see if I can just do this. Let me just go hard as I can.
It does feel like this is the way you talk about it, though. This is like the closest I've heard you like think I'm close, but I'm not, and I'm not ever going to for a reason, which is like there is this new fucking achievement for looking up Kaine skirt 10 times, and it's like right. I don't remember what it's which
like.
Was in Automata,
the truth,
the
which
secret.
Is. It right, yeah. Well,
it's the same thing from Automata too.
Yep.
Except that here it's explicitly tied to a fetishization of her intersex status, and that is like extremely gross because Kaine is such. We should just jump ahead actually, and there's a question here about this. About Kaine more broadly, and I think talking through why we like Kaine will help explain why that achievement fucking sucks. Where is it here?
I do want to give a quick shout out to the bridge to the Lost Shrine and the bathtub at the top of the Lost Shrine in terms of favorite places.
Oh yeah, true.
Because those are such details that are so weird to me. Like the clawfoot bathtub at the top of the Lost Shrine has been stuck with me since 2000 and whatever the fuck NieR came out.
And the bridge you only see like twice if you play through the whole game through. In fact, you only see it once, right? You only see it the first time you go because you never replay that section of the game.
Right.
or maybe you do that in Route E? Do you go to Lost Shrine again? You
do,
must,
yes.
right? So yeah, that's the only other time you do that run. And again, that's part of why I like the Route E repetition is because like, oh yeah, there used to be a bridge that connects you to the Lost Shrine. I didn't have to do this shit with the boat.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tony wrote in and said, where is the line drawn between Kojima's weird lady characters and Yoko Taro's weird lady characters? Knowing the stories of both Metal Gear Solid and Nier, where is the line drawn for creating scantily clad female secondary characters with story reasons for being so undressed? Specifically, why does no one feel ashamed for their words and deeds regarding Quiet, but I have not heard the same kind of outcry for Kaine? They are both otherworldly story conceits that don't need to exist in the manner that they do, but everyone seems to love Kaine so much more and accept her clothing situation when they did not with Quiet. Is the prospect that this is her choice to dress this way versus Quiet being forced into that situation? Is it her belligerent attitude and fighting for someone she cares about versus Quiet being quiet? I admit to knowing less about Quiet, but I've yet to hear about her personality at all. Yeah, well, here's your answer.
There you go.
Or does Kaine just have a better skimpy outfit than Quiet? While I do like her in Nier in general, I cannot help but feel hesitant towards her character and dress regarding her being intersex and being another pretty model to look at. Paired with how much more anime smooth-faced pretty lady they made her in the remake and the gross achievement they paired her with, I don't know how. I feel like she's any different than a story conceit to look at a nice body. You could expound this further to other characters as well, both game makers really liking tight slight outfits on women and making story reasons for them being that way, with Kojima having a much longer record of not great women characters, but I felt the Kaine Quiet comparison was the most apt. Sorry if you may have discussed this, I'm still catching up, it's just bothering me a bit. Regards, Tony. D, I feel like you also hit me up with a message about that last night. I'm curious how you feel on that one.
I did. Well, because like, one, I want to be in the part of the internet where we're not discussing, we're not constantly relitigating Yoko Taro's horniness, because it's constantly, and like I mean, we went through this with Automata, like and the maid outfits and things like that, and I think Automata makes the case for 2B and A2 much better, because there is a very strong through line there about, designed intentionality and the androids, being like built and constructed to be like this particular visual archetype. And like we make things look pretty, and conform to, societal expectations of prettiness and things like that. Versus like, the robots in that are just like weird and clunky and,
round
machines.
And, yeah. Stubby in ways that are not right. That are cute in some ways, but are not meant to be attractive. Right.
And so like, but like, I think, the big thing with Kaine is that Kaine is a character. Quiet is not a character. Quiet literally, there is a reason for her not to speak in the narrative.
and it's about that if she speaks, other people get hurt.
Yeah.
Right. And like in that way, she has Emil's story minus Emil's story.
Yeah.
It's like Kojima got to, what if we had a character who, if they touched the world in any way, the world was hurt by it, and then we didn't do anything with that until they hurt the world. And that's the end of it. We didn't delve into the interiority around what makes that person, and how they see the world and blah, blah, blah. Whereas like with Emil, we get a lot of that. With Kaine, we get a ton of that by the time you get through ending E. And likewise, when I think about the other characters from Kojima who do this, it's like the Beauty and the Beast squad, where like they're writhing around in tight bodysuits and don't have any, and it's like, and a third party says the tragedy they went through and the ways in which they were traumatized that led them to be like this. It's not those characters as agents in their worlds. And I also, listen, I definitely follow the lead on this. It's like, who feels moved by this character? Who inside of a fandom or an audience thinks this character is well designed, including who thinks they're hot, and how are they speaking about that? And let me tell you, it's mostly not cis dudes who I hear like hooting and hollering about Kaine. Maybe that reflects my circles. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it, like Bayonetta, there is a very loud like contingent of queer women who love these characters and who feel like they are being spoken to or represented or otherwise appealed to with the ways in which these characters are represented, not just visually but textually as well. I think Kaine slaps. Like, Kaine is just a dope character, and that carries a long way.
And there's a solid argument to be made that, like, you can argue that Kaine is the actual protagonist of NieR. Like,
but I also know there are people listening who are like, and that doesn't do enough for me.
Yeah.
I still feel like she's objectified, and I don't like this. And I'm not here to tell you you're wrong for feeling bad about the way a character feels objectified, in the same way that I would hope that if you're listening, you wouldn't feel mad about me being upset about the way fatness is deployed as in gross ways in things like Resident Evil 8, or the ways in which blackness are used as punchlines or whatever. And I think the thing that ends up happening, I was just having this conversation with someone actually in the Waypoint Discord about DMX. Someone who was younger was like, why are people upset about DMX dying? He says lots of homophobic shit in his lyrics. And it's like, listen, we grew up in a different era, and as a black queer dude, my options for music content were nothing, and not just music content, right? There is nothing I grew up with that was not either racist or homophobic, right? That was not either about or misogynist in a way that then exploded out into being also an attack on any sort of like any sort of masculinity that is not deeply heteronormative macho masculinity, right?
Yeah.
There was no outside of that stuff, and I still don't think that there really is. I don't think that you can find pure media, and I think that we should be much more like looking for how does a work speak to us than why do we connect to it. For DMX, it was that like this person who had this really loud, aggressive like stance that he was able to take was also someone who could talk deeply about his feelings of loss and grief and depression. That like It Is Dark and Hell Is Hot is an album that is as often braggadocious about what he's capable of doing as much as it is like that backstep that feels like he's on his back foot and that he's like consumed with grief and an internal dialogue about who he is and whether or not, you know, how to show that grief in ways that are acceptable and all that stuff. And so it's not like, oh, I look past the homophobia to like DMX. It's not like I look past the sexualization of Kaine to look at NieR. It's that I think that all of the works in the world are compromised in ways, and it's about killing the cop in my head, because otherwise I end up being a person who's just like on Twitter yelling at people about what fandoms they're in. And that's just not a productive way to engage with texts or engage with my own taste. And instead it's about engaging with stuff that I feel either comfortable with or willing to be challenged by, and engaging with the parts of it that work for me, figuring out why the parts don't work for me, and trying to like sit with that, while not saying to other people, well, why can't you just do what I do? Because I recognize that different people have different like degrees of ability to sit with shit like this, and ways in which there's certainly stuff where I'm like, this goes too far for me, I can't come with you down this road, and I expect that it's true for a lot of other people as well. So I think if Kaine is too far for you, then that's just the thing that it is. You know, I don't think that that's a problem. She isn't for me, largely because she's rendered in such detail as a character. You know, that it's not that it justifies the outfit. I think Yoko Taro likes this horny outfit on Kaine, but that doesn't upset me enough to make me feel like I can't engage with who she is as a character and what's going on there.
Well, and there is like a weird component, like for me, like looking at especially the remaster for NieR, is these characters look so much more like Japanese ball jointed dolls.
Oh, they really do. Wow, I hadn't thought about that.
Kaine especially is she is a dollfie. Like Kaine and NieR together are just dollfies. And like if you Google dollfie, that's kind of what you get.
Those big eyes, the lanky limbs,
weird,
like,
and the way they
right.
animate. Even like there is a weirdness to it, and like for me that really falls into when we go into buildings in NieR, we always go into a dollhouse view. And so there is this component of like, yes, Kaine is objectified. Like Kaine in some regard is an object, and like having to deal with that and process that is part.
In fact, all of the replicants are
right. All of the
objects.
replicants are objects, literally. Yeah. And so having to like work through that and kind of giving you this very, very explicit, you know, and again, this is me projecting onto the text. I don't know that, you know, Yoko Taro has not said, I made Kaine a sexy Barbie doll, you know, because I want you to grapple with the concept of objectification in this visual way. But it is, Kaine is objectified in a visual way, and you have to deal with that. The same way you'd have to deal with, you know, 2B and 9S and all of them are all objectified because they are objects. And so there is like another layer of like, no, you're going to grapple with this if you want to engage with this text because it is unavoidable. And I love when that happens because you don't get that with Quiet. The most you have to grapple with is just like, okay, yeah, we get it. All right, you were horny and this is what you like. You did the plate of eggs that look like boobs to you. Fucking hell. Like, you know?
All right, let's move on. I want to hit a couple of these extra questions and then we can wrap up because we've been going for a couple hours now. And I know we all have the rest of our day to get to. One of the things I ask people to do is send in their perspectives as OG fans who now appreciate or saw Ending E and what they thought about Ending E. Zach wrote in and said, as someone so thoroughly obsessed with the original game as to put an entire tattoo on my forearm, also, I have a wedding ring with a black box design. I feel qualified to write in. Having known only the bittersweet Ending D for about a decade, it was a wild experience to hear that Ending E was added in version 1.2.2. It was originally included in Grimoire NieR, which again is the short story collection, and I think also art book and some other stuff going on in there. But that just didn't hit the same. Getting to play as Kaine was an unbelievable surprise that caused me to set my controller down to properly process. What a cliche, I know. The myriad additions, such as the Mermaid storyline or campfire scene, were jaw-dropping, but getting to see the protagonist properly return was surreal after thinking his existence was erased 10 years ago was unfathomable. I can admit that I cried as I processed the emotions I was feeling. So yes, an OG fan would be pretty happy about the new content. To make my favorite game somehow even better is a treasure I hold dear. I can even happily eat a decade's worth of crow and admit the story works better with Bro NieR. Thanks for reading this, Zach. P.S. I attached an image of my tattoo now because I don't have to explain it to people as thoroughly. I'm gonna do a screenshot of this here and paste it because I put it in the Google Doc and that's a pain to get those out of there. But here you go. Let me just drop that in here. It is a picture of I believe that's the Beast Lord sword, which is one of my favorite two-handers. It just looks sick. There's a cool like monster face on the top. It's like a tiger. I don't remember what it is. And then like some cool flowers, like lunar tears growing up around it here. And at the bottom is our grimoires. There's Grimoire Vice open, and it's just sick. It's very good. Good tattoo, Zach. Any responses to that, or should I read another one of these Route E emails?
I think you can go.
Just keep on running through them. Yeah. Okay. Another long time NieR old head here. Replicant, my personal take on Replicant version 1.2.2 bunch of numbers was that it greatly exceeded my expectations for version update / remake / remaster. It really feels like it plays to the strengths and gives the fans exactly what they'd want and more. All the new content manages to be immensely satisfying. Updated music sounds excellent. The Automata style combat is smoother and less janky to play. The real treat though is having everything voiced now. This is going back and watching footage and seeing that not everything was voiced kind of blew me away. Likewise, this is Austin speaking, going forward to Automata and seeing and like playing Automata and being like, oh wait, most of this isn't voiced. I'd completely forgotten that like side characters just aren't voiced.
Right.
Going back now to Kevin's email, it's the reason why myself and so many other fans are absolutely infatuated with this game. It's the dynamic of this band of misfits traveling together and playing off of one another. To be able to reunite a voice cast from a decade ago and have it all sound like I remember, it's just hard to put into words. Coming back to this after Automata does make me appreciate how Automata did its additional story routes. While the extra content for Route B in Replicant still does its job to make you feel like a terrible human being, I'll note Patrick sent me a lot of messages to that effect as he was playing through, just being like, this fucking statue guard didn't do anything wrong. Anyway, while all the extra context in Route B for Replicant still does its job to make you feel like a terrible human being, I'd be lying if I say that parts of it weren't still tedious, especially since I was chomping at the bit to see the new ending while trying to dodge spoilers. I was very excited to learn from trailers that one of the stories, The Little Mermaid from the Grimoire NieR book, was inserted into the game, and I had only read translations, and was pleased with how faithful it managed to stick to that text. I didn't expect that ending E would also draw from the same source initially, but found myself getting incredibly psyched when I started on this ending path, going back to the Forest of Myth with Kaine, having this familiar inkling of what was going on, and basically saying to myself, oh shit, are we actually doing this? Going back and revisiting the rough translation of the source text, it also feels largely faithful while making smart updates to some of the Automata's elements. Things like splitting the administrator into two characters to harken back to 2B and 9S, or trading what is, quote, the border between reality and a dream world for the digital aesthetic of Automata's copied city and digital setting. They are essentially retcons, but conveyed as love letters to the fans. My favorite observations about ending E, it's a Deus Ex Arbor Machina, God in the Machine Tree. Playing as Kaine is a treat. Hearing her theme triumphant during the last fight made me tear up. It ends with Laura Bailey giving another impassioned and swear-laden tirade as Kaine, mirroring the US Attract movie from 2010, the first thing I remember seeing or hearing after booting up the game for the first time. That's a thing that's changed. Patrick and Cado, did you know that about the 2010 game? Is that when you booted it up, it opened with Kaine fucking swearing up a storm? Because that was
happens.
Like the opening movie. Is it still the opening movie?
Not the opening.
No, it's not.
If you leave it on, let the opening movie go through once, then the next time it's just her swearing and stuff.
It's just her. So that used to be the first thing I believe.
That's very good.
That's beautiful.
That's amazing.
Other stuff here, mentions of Masa research and song by the administrators also tie back to Drakengard. The setup of a giant flower is the rebirth mechanism. While this spells doom for some Drakengard fans, it's left ambiguous if it's really a harbinger of another apocalypse. Can't wait to learn what happens in Drakengard. And restoration of a save data is basically a subversion of a subversion and feels wholly optimistic. Even on an entirely different gaming platform, 11 years later, having a character fight to get back your data, i.e. the protagonist, just hits hard in a strange and beautiful way. So yeah, fantastic surprise for me all around, and was glad this update got so much TLC. Made me start playing Automata again immediately after. Thanks for reading, Kevin from North Carolina. Yeah, all that's good. Again, the voice stuff as well. Also, this makes me remember, did any of y'all do the final greeting thing in the options?
Yeah, it's tremendous.
Yeah. It's so nice. It's so nice to just hear everybody. Maybe one more question, then we'll wrap it up. How's that sound? I'm not going to read this. We got a lot of people with long theories that are just like too long for me to read on a podcast. Please maybe drop them on the forums. That feels like the right place.
Yeah.
For some of this stuff. To me anyway. All right. I think I'll read. We've already kind of done the one about the question about how important it is that you know what, maybe this actually works. Alex writes in and says, in a recent episode, you were discussing the NieR games and their links to games in the Drakengard universe. It seemed those on the episode shared an interest in Yoko Taro working on the project that better establishes the links between these series and pondered what the experience was like for both longtime and new fans. I'm someone who played through one ending of NieR 1 and years later came to love Automata. Like Austin and Patrick, I too came too close to seriously considering playing the Drakengard games to try to understand the full picture of the Yoko Taro-verse, but usually just fall back on YouTube summary videos for the games I probably wouldn't enjoy playing. Shout out to the YouTuber Klemps, apparently.
Do I need do I need to enjoy the experience, or do I need to just have the experience? Those are different things, my friend.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Austin and I are leaning towards one of those.
I want to play these games.
It's gonna have Austin and I have
Waypoint 101 is coming back.
No, it'll probably be a stream. It'll probably be a stupid stream overnight of something. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, like there's been like a couple of times where Austin and I have tried to do like late night horror, so then like we load up one that's like, like this one is actually like deeply problematic. We probably shouldn't play it anymore.
Play this game,
and so let's at least, if we're gonna play something that, you know, who knows? I don't know. Is Drakengard problematic? I don't know. But let's find out.
Yes, it is. Yes, the answer is extremely. Anyway,
let's go on this problematic journey as a family,
as a group, yeah, exactly. While I like discovering the connections between Yoko Taro's games, I think I have a lot more interest in future games pursuing whatever topic the developers want to, as opposed to a lore fill-in-the-gap style game. I think part of the appeal of these connections is how tenuous and uncertain they are, and I think there's something to this largely fan-led exercise, and I don't feel like I need a definitive creator answer to enjoy it. How valuable is the authorial-approved storytelling to you? Are there stories or fandoms that you wish would prefer to have less definitive authorial answers? And I'm looking at you, Star Wars. Best Alex K from DC. I do wish that last Star Wars movie hadn't come out, and if that was the case, then we could just all imagine a different ending to that trilogy. I feel like at this point, I want this team to make whatever game they want to make more than I want. And we floated this before, like some sort of other game set during the ending of Drakengard that kind of leads to the Gestalt project stuff.
I also just don't I love this world, but actually don't have an emotional attachment to the lore. I'm trying to entangle what I mean by this, but I don't care if I learn that much more about this world. That makes total sense. I think it's endlessly fascinating. I think it's really interesting. But at the same time, if I woke up this summer, if we found out the next game that Yoko was working on is, maybe there's a loose stuff. If it just throws it all away and does things, I was I don't care. If it's only as connected to NieR as NieR is to Drakengard, which is sure,
the same world,
it's actually he goes it's instead it's 2 years later, but instead he just keeps adding zeros, and it turns out it's 2 million years later, and it's who the fuck cares? I don't have I guess I have as much emotional connection to learning more about this world as much as Yoko has in telling it. Is the feeling I have. I can take it or leave it on learning more about the particulars in so much. And also I just think I care about the characters more than I care about the world. Flatly speaking. I don't find myself reading the Wikipedia pages to learn more about the whys, unless it's related to the why of an Emil or what have you, as opposed to needing to know what the humans were up to,
where white chlorination came from.
I just don't. That part I don't care. But when it relates to the characters themselves, and I know that sounds easy, but I don't think that's actually true of all fans. Some fans strictly do want to know the A, B, C, D, E, and I was I care about the B if it impacts the characters that I've grown to care about. And there are other worlds where that's not true. I think we have different experiences with different your fandom related to a universe is different. And some of them you do want to know, all that stuff. But in this particular
go back to
one,
me saying actually in Star Wars, I would love to know the moment that Jedi do X, Y, become
exactly
de facto force, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Right. I was that when I was watching Lost. Next to one of my bathrooms is a Lost encyclopedia. That's a world that spoke to me where I wanted to know every X, Y, and Z, even if that was bad for me and the world itself. I can recognize that. But in this particular universe, I'm mostly there for the characters, and that's usually just about the story that's being told in the story itself, as opposed to its broader implications.
I think my thing is I want Dia has two hands. And so
yes,
if we want to Yoko Taro has a habit of just doing what he feels with the lore and the world building, and it's just okay, sure, just throw shit in there. I'm cool with it. I was there with all the bullshit in Evangelion. I'm here for all the bullshit in NieR and Automata. Let's do it. Give me that anime crap. But also if we could do something else, that's wonderful. If it's 10,000, 20,000, 5 million. What was the spread between partisan and
50,000 years between counter. Partisan would be another 5,000, so 55,000 years between counterweight and partisan. Don't ask why that one mech made it through those 55,000 nanomachines. Nanomachines did it.
Yeah.
Go read. Also, go listen to the Game Study Buddies episode on Mondo Nano, a book that's I guess not technically technically game studies, but it's stuff about nanotechnology. Made me think of my own nanotechnology bullshit under a more critical light, I will say.
But anyway. If we get a game that doesn't fill in gaps, I'm cool with that. But also, there is a part of me that wants Yoko Taro to approach Team Ninja and be hey, y'all, let's make a game set in 2002.
Right.
And we do the fall of Jericho.
Right. Exactly.
And it's just it's just sick character action game. And
that's the thing about the just briefly the quilt style of story. Like this is earlier I was talking shit about like the cataloging impulse, the impulse of like I'm gonna figure out everything and find the truth about the way things interact. That doesn't mean I don't like there being a huge network of timelines and a map of all the different connecting things. I do like that because it produces the opportunity for new stories to emerge inside of those spaces. Yeah. The thing I don't like is thinking that by revealing the diagram of the story, you will only then unlock the truth of it. That is the thing that I resist.
And that's why, like, I want, like, like there are always parts of me that's like, what if we focused on like one of these weird short stories, in the item descriptions in Dark Souls, and like that we just spun off and did a whole game with that or something like that. Or like, like I said, like with the, there is the whole humanity trying to fight Legion and the white chlorination syndrome. And like, ultimately, it's kind of just like Shin Megami Tensei happening, which is what, but I also like, I'm like, we could do something cool with that. We could find a whole new mix of genres and find a story within that. And that story, if it does not line up with NieR or like the timeline that we have established, fuck yeah, do it. Like, I don't care.
Also, I'll note the painted world in Dark Souls is sort of exactly like, let's build a game around an item description, and it rules. The painted world of REM is one of the highlights. Anyway, Cado, you had something else here too.
I was just gonna say, I feel like my want here is only more lore that's connected if it's in service of re-exploring, or like if it needs the context of the themes of the game, like the way that the context of like the lore between Replicant and Automata like kind of helps the reading of Automata, of like the context of those themes. Like that sort of filling in, I think is fine, is like what I'm actually interested in more than like the like plot point lore filling in. So like, but also they've done enough of these games in this specific universe that I am kind of curious what Taro would do outside of it. Right, like
well, we're at the point where there are 2 Yoko Taro Drakengard games and 2 NieR games, 2 and ending E of this as new things, and so it's like, well, is next going to even be in this same universe, like sub-universe of the larger universe, or who knows? We'll see. And we didn't even talk about Sin of Alice, Sin of Alice. I don't know. Which also, and there's a NieR mobile game, which I'm not gonna play.
I looked at like one gameplay trailer of that and was like, nah, sorry, I can't. Like, send me the YouTube wrap up video and I'm good.
Yeah, please. All right. I think that's going to do it for us. Thank you for joining us on this NieR Spoilercast. Dia, thank you so much for coming through and dropping knowledge. Always a pleasure to have you on this podcast. I'm so glad I got to actually be on one with you finally. Right. As always, you can follow us, twitter.com/waypoint. You can follow me, twitter.com/Austin_Walker. Patrick, how about you?
At Patrick Klepek.
Cado.
At _Cado_appears.
Dia, where can people find you, your work, anything you want to point people to in this moment?
You can find me at Dia Lacina. Is probably that's where I'm at.
Go.
Everything is there.
Everything is there. Go follow Dia, please. Dia is great. We'll be back later this week with another episode. Shout out as always to Bowen for letting us use the track "Miss You" off the EP Pale Machine. Find out more about that at waypoint.zone/BOEN. I think that's going to do it. That's going to do it.
Perfect timing.
As always,
I just started jackhammering outside of my apartment.
Fuck capitalism. Go home. Please take care of your sick sister/daughter, whichever she is in this.
But don't make it your identity.
But don't make it right. Exactly. But don't make it your identity so much that you become an object full of rage. Take note that the version of NieR who comes out of the flower in the end is pre-rage-filled adult boy NieR, and instead is innocent, filled with love boy NieR, because you don't want to be the one who's just like, I want to kill these motherfuckers.
No, you want to be the one who's like, every time that within 5 minutes of meeting someone, you're my new friend.
Exactly.
I do love that about him. We didn't get to touch on it, but like, I love that he just every time he runs into someone, it's just like, you're my friend now.
You're my friend now. I'm gonna protect you now. That's gonna happen. All right. Have a good one, everyone. Peace. I learned a new technique. Here's a new technique.
Okay.
A new time.is technique. I picked this up from the Beastcast. This is how this shit works, right? I bring time.is to the Beastcast, then they teach me a new thing. I'm going to say 2 numbers. We're going to clap at both of them. That way, if someone fucks up with the first one, the second one gets caught. You see what I'm saying? Try it out.
Has this been an issue?
Nice.
Are you like bringing to the surface like a problem that we just haven't been talking about, and now you're addressing?
I think that it's a good
It's just a good backup.
Okay.
A good
I see how it
redundancy.
is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, all right, next time we're together, I want to know who's the one who can't do it. Who's the chronic?
It's probably me.
Can't clap.
It's probably me if it's anyway. Anyway, let's do 35 and then 38.
Okay.
All right.
All right, let me just I grab a Kleenex. I'll be right back.
Okay. Fucking Jeff Bakalar over there doesn't clap anymore. He has a button that puts a beep onto his file when he hits.
Oh
the
God!
Button.
Beep.
Truly some Jeff Bakalar shit right there.
Yeah.
Cado, why are you dressed like Emil? Your icon.
That's true. You do have some.
No. That is
Emil.
just
A little Cado burrito.
an icon that I've been using forever of me wearing a trash bag because it didn't have an umbrella.
I get a lot of Emil energy from Cado. I feel like that's that, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. So yeah, see, there it is.
My game.
Cado _Cado _appears _ my _ mouth.
Excuse me.
What?
Excuse you.
He looks like a burrito. Wrap him up.
Oh, burrito.
Burrito.
You may have missed what we were talking about. That he looked like a meal to us in this.
Oh, yeah, I heard a meal. A meal. Why can't a burrito be a meal?
No,
A meal.
God.
Meal.
The
Oh, a
character.
meal. Oh, from
Meal.
NieR. Oh, please
Yeah.
put this at the
Oh,
back
my
end of the
God.
podcast, Cado.
Damn. Looking like
A lot of
meal.
different interpretations might come out of that one.
Yes. We were making those interpretations. We were very confused and concerned.
Look, I consider this to be a space where I could be open. About my
Yeah.
feelings.
Good.
Just
Okay.
like NieR.
Sure. Like
you know?
NieR. Yeah. All right. This is not a numbered episode, Cado, right?
No, it'll be the NieR Spoilercast.
I think you should number it. You introduce it with the numbers from the game.
Oh, that's very funny.
As far as you can get without just look. I need you to look at it once. I need you to look at it once, look away, and then try and recite as many from memory as possible.
Okay. So it's fucked because I have to do the rest of the intro.
I know that's where it's because you're gonna be thinking about trying to remember the numbers while you're doing
Patrick,
that.
this is like a psych kind of evaluate test that they banned.
See, this is we cut the stuff from the podcast, but you don't understand the prep work that goes into me punching up Austin before we get into a podcast.
Gotta get me ready to go. Okay.